Chapter 607. On Yujing Mountain, Lin Feng's divine sense swept across the people in his disciples' abode. Overall, the quality was acceptable, but there was no one who was particularly outstanding. Except for Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinwu, who were already in his pocket, no one else could reach 30. The relatively outstanding ones were Dao Yuding and Zhuge Wanqiu. Whether they could reach Yuanying in 50 years was still a question mark for these two girls. Man proposes, God disposes. Lin Feng always liked to make worse predictions. So, although he would cultivate the two of them vigorously, in Lin Feng's mind, he still considered them as disciples in the Golden Elixir period. In this way, there was still a gap of 10 Yuanying in 50 years, and he needed to continue looking for top seedlings with potential. According to Lin Feng's estimation, if the total value of the 4 potential items was above 30 and the foundation was not mediocre, there was a high chance of forming the nascent soul in 50 years. Before forming the nascent soul, especially before forming the gold core, the foundation was the most important potential attribute. Not only was it related to the speed of cultivation, but it also determined the foundation of a cultivator's cultivation. If one accidentally formed a yellow or green core, it would directly cut off the hope of forming the nascent soul. Lin Feng's 8 trigrams of the Great Way of Heaven was heaven-defying enough. As long as one succeeded in cultivation, there's almost 100% chance of forming a first-grade beer and establishing a first-grade pill cauldron. In this way, there was hope of forming the purple core. However, Taoist techniques had ridiculously high requirements for talent. It was not something that ordinary people could play. Otherwise, it would not have given birth to Zhu Yi's 8 trigrams of the Great Way of Yi. Currently, only Lin Feng's direct disciples could start from the orthodox Taoist scripture. On one hand, it was because Taoist techniques were not easily passed down, and on the other hand, it was impossible to pass it down even if one wanted to. If one's talent was slightly inferior, it would be difficult to achieve anything at all. Wang Lin's comprehension and willpower were at full value, but because of his foundation, he was stuck in the early stage of foundation building for a long time. He tried to forcibly build a beer, but the grade was only mid-grade. This caused Lin Feng to rudely interrupt his forced breakthrough. Only after the Heaven Spirit replenishing pill, the Heaven Mending Vine, the Divine Stone spiritual platform, and many other treasures did he finally succeed. The resources that Wang Lin had invested in building his spirit platform had been poured into Lin Feng regardless of the cost. Even with his current wealth, he didn't have the confidence to provide for a few more. What's more, it was only Wang Lin. If it was someone else with a mediocre constitution, they wouldn't be able to build a spirit platform at all. They wouldn't even be able to open their sea of qi and build their foundation. The problem is, the total value is 30. It's very difficult to find them. When I found Tianhao and the others, I was completely lucky. Lin Feng shook his head. Not to mention Xiao Yin, Shi Tianhao, and the others who were destined to have a total value of 33 to 34. It was extremely rare for someone to have a total value of 30 to 32. Although some people couldn't see the specific value, Lin Feng could still make a rough estimate. Among the younger generation that he had personally interacted with, only Shi Tianyi, Marquis Jinghuan, Shi Xingyun, and Zhao Junshin might have a total value of 30 or above. Among them, Zhao Junshin was still a question mark. Xiaozhe didn't need to be counted. Lin Feng could clearly see her value. Tao Yaoyao's constitution, power of understanding, and willpower shouldn't be low, but it seemed that she didn't have much luck. She was probably about the same as Dao Yuding. Sigh. If I had known this would happen, I would have brought Xiaozhe into the sect. Lin Feng sighed. The girl had already formed her nascent soul by cultivating the Tao passed down in her family. Even if he wanted to bring her in now, he couldn't. With the system's sly character, it probably wouldn't admit it. Lin Feng stood up and walked out of the All Heavens Hall. There's still a long way to go. The second time he opened the mountain to recruit disciples, he could use it as a reserve for the foundation building stage and the Golden Elixir period. Including the disciples he recruited during the first time, it was quite a considerable number. It was just that he had to continue to pay attention and select outstanding talents. Although he needed to try his luck, he had to work hard. After sure Tianhao and the others had all formed their nascent soul, he would also let the few kids off the mountain and see if they could pick them up. Damn, if you really push me too far, then I'll use a big move. Lin Feng thought rather unscrupulously. Too evil? But the feasibility is actually quite high. He came to the desolate Sky Valley, where Shi Tianhao lived. The valley was filled with mighty dragon might, and if it was someone who didn't know better, they would think that they were in the ancient Sky Dragon domain. Lin Feng entered the valley and saw Xiao Yin, Yu Hongyin, Yang Qing, and the others were also here, all surrounding Shi Tianhao speechlessly. Besides Shi Tianhao, there were huge dragon bones lying there, some complete and some broken. There were several complete dragon skeletons, which were all demon kings who had formed their nascent soul when they were alive, and even after death, the dragon might was still extremely vast. But sure, Tianhao easily and happily dug them up, and did not spend any effort at all. It was an incomplete corpse which was left behind by the dragon race who had formed an indestructible demon soul. You stayed in the Dragonstone Gate for a long time, just to dig it up? Xiao Yin said somewhat speechlessly. Sure, Tianhao nodded. It really was a bit difficult. It said that when a tiger dies, the wind remains, and it seems that it's the same when a dragon dies. Everyone rolled their eyes in unison. Wasn't this nonsense? You, a late golden elixir cultivator, want to dig up the remains of an indestructible demon soul. Even a skinny camel is bigger than a horse, let alone a dragon king. Seeing that Lin Feng had arrived, everyone bowed together. Lin Feng did not care about those dragon bones. They were all sure Tianhao's private property. He could do whatever he wanted with them. What about that Ongpa skull? Asked Lin Feng. Sure Tianhao's eyes lit up, and he smiled. I was just about to ask Master for help. The void above his head suddenly split open, revealing a chaotic cauldron. Inside the furnace, the bronze void cauldron and the ice-cold light mirror appeared together, and the bronze void cauldron shook more and more violently. Without the help of Shi Tianhao's own magic power, the two Yuanying realm artifacts were actually somewhat unable to suppress this magic treasure embryo. Lin Feng pointed his finger and removed the bronze void cauldron and the ice-cold light mirror. A golden skull immediately flew out, surrounded by purple lightning and pulsating nonstop. The silhouette of a giant bird appeared from within. It was huge and had a proud expression. Under the illumination of the lightning, the feathers on its chest and abdomen were pale gold. The feathers on its head and tail were emerald green, and the crown on its head was bluish purple. It was the primordial great demon, Thunder Beast Ongpa. As soon as the silhouette of Ongpa appeared, it spread its wings and flapped its three-colored divine feathers, wanting to soar into the sky. Lin Feng casually pointed his finger at Ongpa's forehead, and the silhouette collapsed. Wherever Lin Feng's finger went, the lightning dissipated and the golden precious skull was revealed. With Lin Feng's finger pointing, the Ongpa skull immediately stopped breathing, and all of its brilliance disappeared. It fell from midair, and sure Tianhao caught it. After you form your nascent soul, you just have to refine it again. Lin Feng said indifferently, there's no need to destroy the original seal. The secret method of Taishu Temple has its uniqueness, and it can help you activate this magic treasure embryo in the Yuanying realm. He pointed his finger at Shi Tianhao's forehead, and immediately a spell was transmitted into his mind. This is the secret method of Taishu Temple that Master has just concluded. You can slowly comprehend it, and when the time comes, you can refine the magic treasure. Shi Tianhao smiled, nodded, and put away the Ongpa skull. After that, 5 days passed. Silently, Lin Feng observed the people in the disciples' abode. He had a deeper understanding of them, and it was no longer just their potential data. On the 5th day, Lin Feng issued a decree. Everyone gather outside the All Heavens Hall. Under Dao Jiqiang's arrangement, the disciples in the disciples' abode quickly gathered and came to the open space outside the All Heavens Hall. There, Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the others were already waiting with their respective inner disciples. After everyone had arrived, Lin Feng's voice came from the All Heavens Hall, "Descend the mountain." At this moment, Mount Yujing had already returned to the Kunlun mountain range. At this moment, under Lin Feng's control, it slowly emerged from the void, descended into the boundless world, and floated in the sky. Below the mountain was one of the few peaks in the northern foothills of the Kunlun mountain range, Lingyun Peak. This was also the location where Mount Yujing first appeared in the world. Under Lin Feng's orders, Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the others led a group of junior disciples down the mountain. Everyone landed on the peak next to Lingyun Peak. On Mount Yujing, Lin Feng's supernatural power turned into a ball of purple gas and descended, enveloping the peak of Lingyun Peak. In the next moment, the group of junior disciples suddenly widened their eyes. They saw that the huge peak of Lingyun Peak was directly cut off by the purple gas, and it was sucked up. The cross-section of the peak was as smooth as a mirror. As if a knife was cutting through tofu, a flat surface was neatly cut out, and not a single hole or flaw could be found. Lingyun Peak was as tall as the clouds, and the mountain was huge. The top of the peak that was cut off was like a towering mountain, but with a slight shake of the purple gas, the peak that was cut off instantly disappeared, as if it had never existed. The group of disciples looked around, but no matter how hard they looked, they could not find where Lin Feng threw the peak. Then, the purple gas spread out and landed on the relatively low mountains next to Lingyun Peak. It was like a huge wave slapping on a sand castle on the beach, and all the mountains were flattened in an instant. Dust flew in the midst of the roar, as if a sandstorm had been set off. In the next moment, the purple gas seemed to transform into a giant hand, and it dug on the ground that had been flattened by it. A huge pit suddenly appeared in the open space between the mountains. The purple gas turned, and the spiritual qi in the sea of clouds was transformed. A huge amount of water flowed into the deep pit, and it instantly turned into a huge lake with no end in sight. It was as if a sea had appeared between the mountains. The bottom of the lake was opened by Lin Feng, and with the guidance of spiritual qi, it was connected to the underground water vein of Kunlun Mountain itself. In the blink of an eye, the terrain of this mountainous area in Kunlun Mountain had completely changed. A large plain appeared between the mountains, and on the plain was a huge lake that looked like an inland sea. On the edge of the lake, a tall mountain stood, and the peak was a flat, open space. When Lu Xiafeng, Su Yunsheng, and the others saw this scene, they subconsciously swallowed their saliva. Although the strength of the battle between Shi Tianhao, Yu Hongyan, and the others was very far away from them, at least they could understand some parts of it. They could understand the strength and subtlety of the battle between the two sides. However, when it came to Lin Feng's level, although the battle with others was more mysterious and the scene was more grand, for these rookies in the qi refinement stage, they could not understand it at all. They could only judge Lin Feng's strength according to the strength of the opponent. Seeing that Lin Feng defeated the ambitious giants and legendary giants, the younger disciples felt proud. However, if you really asked them to say how powerful Lin Feng was, they could not say why, because the gap between the two sides' realms was too big. What happened in front of them was just a piece of cake for Lin Feng at this moment. But in the eyes of the younger generation, it was undoubtedly extremely shocking. This kind of strength was something they could fully understand, so it was more intuitive and left a deeper impression. Moving mountains and filling the sea was just a piece of cake. This scene deeply shocked many of the younger disciples of Xianmen Tianzhou. Chapter 608. After Lin Feng did some basic treatment on the terrain, the purple qi dispersed, and then streams of light flew down from Yujing Mountain one after another. The vast sky and the heavy earth, light and darkness, pure yang and pure yin, eternity and instant, creation and death, illusion and reality. 12 streams of light containing different power and conception landed among the mountains below. Countless talismans and magic formations emerged in the air. 12 streams of light merged and interweaved, transforming into a gigantic magic formation that seemed to have no end. It enveloped the cloud-soaring peak the mountains within a radius of thousands of miles, and the lake on the plain. In the crowd, Li Yuanfang looked at the tactical deployment carefully and said, "It's the master's yin and yang life and death formation, but with some changes." The tactical deployment was completely set and began to operate. It didn't matter that the junior's perception was not strong, but Xiao Yin and the others immediately felt that the spiritual qi in the earth veins within thousands of miles of Kunlun Mountain was gathering toward the Lingyun Peak and the lake. The mountain and the lake, one hard and one soft, one yin and one yang, one moving and one still. The mountain was reflected in the lake, and the light from the lake was reflected on the mountain. The mountains and rivers were interdependent, reaching a perfect balance. With the mountains and rivers as the center, the tactical deployment kept operating, changing the direction of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the surrounding environment, and merging them into the yin and yang formation. In the end, without the activation of Lin Feng's supernatural power, the tactical deployment began to operate on its own, driven by the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. A large amount of spiritual qi was gathered between the mountains and rivers. The mountains and rivers seemed to have a life of their own. Instead of devouring and plundering, they breathed in and out spiritual qi slowly, reaching a balance with the whole world. This was Lin Feng's yin and yang life and death formation in its complete state. Then, he extracted the power essence from the 12 treasures and rearranged the yin and yang life and death formation. He integrated the mystery of the tactical deployment inside the disciples' abodes on Yujing Mountain, so that the yin and yang life and death formation on the Lingyun Peak could mainly play the role of gathering life. Under the effect of the tactical deployment, the surrounding terrain was completely changed, and the flow of spiritual qi was also very different. There were few large sects in the Kunlun Mountain area, mainly because the area was not very rich in spiritual qi. It was not deficient, but at least it was not a rare, blessed place. Although Lin Feng's move could not completely reverse the situation of Kunlun Mountain and turn it into a super blessed land comparable to Baiyun Mountain and Shu Mountain, at least it was much better than before. Right now, he was using the life-gathering effect. If he encountered an enemy attack, he could transform into a powerful battle state at any time to kill the enemy. Of course, this yin and yang life and death formation did not have a core formation diagram or a magic treasure to set up the formation. Its power was much weaker than the original formation in Lin Feng's hand. After all, it was a pirated one. However, Lin Feng had left a trace of his own magic power essence in the magic formation. With the help of the geographical advantage of gathering the overall spiritual energy of a large area nearby, the magic formation's defense was quite extraordinary. Even if there was no one controlling it, it could still withstand the attacks of cultivators below the primordial divinity realm. However, in this way, the nature of the formation changed. The yin and yang life and death formation itself did not need a fixed geographical location. However, if this yin and yang life and death formation was filled with treasures such as the dark solitary skeleton, the dark flower amethyst, and the pure yang true fire, the power of the formation would increase accordingly. Lin Feng had now thrown a part of the cyclic purple qi, central earth divine light, pure yang true fire, instant divine sand, and eternal glory into it. Although there was no source formation diagram, it could still exert the complete changes of heaven and earth and instant of eternity. Although it was a reduced version, its power was already extraordinary. After setting up the protective formation, Lin Feng sent down another purple qi from Yujing Mountain and set up another formation on the lakeside plain. The position of the formation was across the lake from Lingyun Peak. As the talisman pattern surged, the void above the circular spiritual formation shook, and a passage was opened. It passed through the endless void, and the end could not be seen. Lin Feng clapped his hands lightly on Yujing Mountain. His mana passed through layers of space and came to the Sand Continent City. There was a manor there, which belonged to Xianmin Tianzong in the Sand Continent. Lin Feng's mana fell on the manor, and turned into a formation that was exactly the same as before. In the radiance of the formation, the void was also broken, and it resonated with the formation by the lakeside in Kunlun Mountain. The space passage opened by both sides was connected in a line. This was a stable space transmission formation that Linfeng had set up. When both formations were activated at the same time, it could build a space bridge between the Sand Continent city and the lakeside. It was very stable, and even ordinary people who did not cultivate qi could be teleported through the formation. They could travel thousands of miles in an instant. Activating the formation required mana, and this would be taken care of by someone else later. Next, Lin Feng clapped his hands lightly again. The soil and rocks by the lakeside rolled, and a majestic city rose from the ground. It was located on high ground, and there was no need to worry about it being flooded. The space transmission formation was in the city, moving mountains and filling the sea. Setting up the formation and raising one's hand, the majestic city was erected. All of this was done in the blink of an eye, and the eyes of the younger disciples were all stunned. Wow, the patriarch really has the means of an immortal. Ying Luojia, who had always been arrogant, rubbed his eyes hard. This is too exciting. Lu Xiaofeng and the others beside him also nodded. Not to mention the inner disciples, the others were even more dumbfounded. Dao Yuding, Li Yuanfeng, Luo Qingwu, and Zhuge Wanqiu were more knowledgeable, but they were also speechless. Zhuge Wanqiu thought for a while. Daddy seems to be able to do it too, but it's far from being as easy as this. No wonder Daddy repeatedly said that the master of the Xianmen sect had great skills and was full of admiration when he heard about the result of the battle in West Hill City. After Lin Feng finished all of this, there was no more sound. Xiao Yin and the others had already received his orders and knew the whole story of what happened today. Xiao Yin immediately said, "According to the Patriarch's decree, from now on, the name of this mountain will be removed from the word Ling, and it will be called Cloud Peak. From today onwards, our sect will establish an outer sect, and the disciples will be divided into two types, foundation laying and true disciples. Anyone who enters the sect will be foundation-laying disciples. Above the cloud peak will be the place where the foundation-laying disciples will cultivate. Every 10 days, there will be instructors from the sect who will teach and guide them. Every other month, there will be sect elders who will hold sermon." Everyone listened very seriously. Xiaoyan looked at them and continued. There will be assessments in the sect from time to time. Those who pass the assessment will become true disciples, and true disciples will follow their teachers to cultivate. True disciples have seniority. After true disciples have built their foundation, they can take in disciples. Foundation-laying disciples have no seniority, only the order of entry. Those who enter later will call those who enter earlier senior brother. Xiaoyan pointed at the big lake and the city. This lake is called Mirror Lake, and the city is called Cloud Mirror City. In the future, it will be for the families and families of Xianmen Tianzong to live. Any disciple of Xianmen Tianzong can bring their families to settle in Cloud Mirror City. Those who dislike this city can also live in Sand Continent City, or those who find it difficult to leave their homeland cannot be forced to move. Everything is voluntary. When everyone heard this, their minds became active. They thought about it carefully and felt that no matter where they lived, there would be different benefits. If their family stayed in their hometown, even though it was far away, some people who did not like to be tied down felt at ease. Anyway, they had entered Xianmen Tianzong and had a big signboard on their heads. They did not go home often, and the locals in their hometown did not dare to bully their families. There were also people who felt that although Cloud Mirror City was desolate, it was on the side of Yinfeng Mirror Lake. It was convenient for them to take care of each other. If there were any benefits, it would be easier for them to be the first to be indebted to the sect. Sand Continent City was a choice that was sandwiched between the two. The matters regarding the relocation of family members will be handled by the outer sect steward, Dao Jiqiang, Mr. Dao. If there is a need, just look for Mr. Dao. At this moment, Dao Jiqiang was standing behind Xiao Yin and the others. After Xiao Yin finished speaking, He smiled and nodded at the younger disciples. Everyone also bowed to him, not daring to look down on him. Those with sharp minds pondered and understood that after Lin Feng gave the order, this seemingly ordinary middle-aged man actually had a shocking amount of power in his hands. In the process of relocation, no matter what choice they made, as long as Dao Jiqiang took care of them a little more, it would be of great benefit. Xiao Yin continued to say, "As I said before, 5 days later you will welcome the first examination after entering the sect. This examination is mainly aimed at people who already have Qi disciple cultivation. People who don't have cultivation can also participate. It's all voluntary. If you pass the assessment, you can become a true disciple. It doesn't matter if you don't pass the assessment. You can just continue to cultivate on Yunfeng. There will be the next assessment in the near future." He looked to the side, and Zhu Yi and Wang Lin nodded at the same time. One of them arrived in Cloud Mirror City, and the other on Yunfeng Peak. They conjured their spells at the same time. Together, the two of them gathered the cyclic purple qi that Lin Feng had left behind and fused it with the scripture of heavenly virtue. Combining it with the earth and stone, buildings immediately rose from the ground. There were many more houses in Cloud Mirror City, and there were also more basic buildings on Yunfeng Peak for people to live in. With Zhu Yi and Wang Lin showing their skills, the younger disciples, who had just recovered from Lin Feng's heaven-defying methods, were shocked again. They were amazed by the methods of Zhu Yi and the others. At the same time, their minds were burning with passion. As far as they knew, the current true disciples, such as Su Yunsheng and the others, were still in the Qi cultivation stage and had not built their foundation. If they became true disciples at this time, they would undoubtedly be worshipped by Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the others as masters. If they waited for Su Yunsheng, Ying Luojia, and Lu Xiaofeng to build their foundation, it would be uncertain who their master would be. A true disciple had seniority, but a foundation disciple did not. It was possible that two people who entered the sect at the same time would become a true disciple. One would become a true disciple early, while the other was still working hard to build his foundation, wasting too much time. By the time he became a true disciple, if his original companion built his foundation, he might become his master. It was even possible that the person who entered the sect later would pass the assessment and become a true disciple earlier than the person who entered the sect first. As a result, when the person who entered the sect first finally became a true disciple, he would find that his original junior brother had become a master or a martial uncle. Generally speaking, the original intention of the system was that learning did not matter before or after, and those who reached first would be the first. Therefore, similar situations were possible, but as long as the assessment was guaranteed to be fair, most people would have nothing to say. Instead, it would stimulate the motivation to improve. As for some people who were jealous and secretly hindered others, there would definitely be situations. But frankly speaking, Lin Feng did not care too much about this. As long as he guided and educated them and ensured that the overall atmosphere of the sect was positive and friendly, it would be fine. If there were some people who went astray, he would just treat them as wolves around a flock of sheep. The sect was also a small society, and there should be all kinds of training. After Zhu Yi and Wang Lin finished their work, they returned to Xiao Yan's side. Zhu Yi looked at the new disciples and those who entered the sect for the first time but did not become true disciples. Silently, he said, "For the next 5 days, all of you will stay on the cloud peak to cultivate. 5 days later, the assessment will officially begin." Chapter 609. Letting people stay on Yujing Mountain for 5 days and then send them to Cloud Peak for 5 days. The difference in duration was more likely to stimulate these foundational disciples to move up. Even if Lin Feng used a formation to gather the spiritual energy near the Kunlun mountain range and improve the environment here to a certain extent, compared to a super blessed land like Mount Yujing, there was still a huge difference. It was a bit exaggerated to say that the difference was like heaven and earth, but after experiencing the abundant spirit Qi on Yujing Mountain and going to Cloud Peak, the difference was huge. Soon, the foundational disciples were like bulls that had seen a red cloth. All of them rubbed their palms together, waiting for the upcoming test to become a true disciple. In the past few days, Lin Feng and his disciples were not idle. Xiao Yin, Shi Tianhao, and the others were all making their own preparations. Just like the last time, the test was divided into 2 rounds. Lin Feng first went through a round of screening, and the disciples who passed had a chance to choose their own master. Then, Xiao Yin and the others had to choose their own disciples for a second round of individualized tests. The difference was that the people who passed Lin Feng's test this time, if they were rejected by the master they chose, they would not be returned. Instead, Lin Feng would make the decision and randomly assign them to someone else. Lin Feng was also making preparations, but it had nothing to do with the test. Instead, he was improving the hardware facilities of his own sect. Although Cloud Mirror City was newly built and seemed desolate, some disciples had already taken the initiative to move their family members. Under the leadership of Dao Jiqiang, through the space matrix between Cloud Mirror City and Sand Continent City, it had already begun to proceed in an orderly manner. At the same time, Lin Feng had already instructed Dao Jiqiang to select reliable people and expand the lineup of outer sect stewards, mainly to handle mundane chores and do logistical work. Between Cloud Mirror City and Cloud Peak, there was a mirror lake. There was a ferry by the lake, and at the foot of Cloud Peak, Lin Feng had set up the mana restriction of the Purple Cheese Stairs. This was the restriction outside West Hill City to test people's hearts, and it served as the mountain gate. Yujing Mountain would remain hidden in the void most of the time in the future. The Cloud Peak would be equivalent to Xianmin Tianzong's front for the outside world. There were also scattered disciples who came to learn from him, and they would all be transported over through the Sand Continent City's spirit formation and then undergo the test of the Purple Cheese Stairs. Those who could pass, and those with outstanding talent, would have the opportunity to become a foundation disciple. Speaking of which, the Sand Continent City also needed a capable person to hold the fort. Cloud Mirror City and Cloud Peak City both needed someone to take care of them. This was really difficult for Dao Jiqiang. Fortunately, Dao Jiqiang was indeed capable and experienced. After getting Lin Feng's approval, he had already started to make preparations. He had already found some useful talents, and after a proper test, they were put to good use. Lin Feng had moved mountains and created lakes and built a city from flat ground. Admittedly, it was a big move and very impressive. But for his will and ideas to be turned into actual operations, he needed the ability of Dao Jiqiang and his subordinates. There were specializations in every field, and IQ was not the same as EQ. Having a high talent in Taoist techniques did not mean that one was capable of doing things. Lin Feng saw this very clearly, so he had made early preparations, and now they were all put to good use. The foot of Yujing Mountain gradually went on the right track. On Yujing Mountain, Lin Feng himself began a new round of construction. The first place to work was the Herb Valley. After being cultivated by the Tianji spirit soil, the herb fields in the Herb Valley were extremely fertile, and the effects of nurturing and breeding spiritual herbs were very good. But spiritual herbs had different habits. After all, not all spiritual herbs were suitable for growing in the same environment. Unless they used the Tianji spirit soil all the time that could satisfy all the needs of spiritual herbs, and they would not reject anything. But many times, using the Tianji doll was like using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. It was completely possible to use a more cost-effective method to deal with it. For example, after the Herb Valley was expanded, it was divided into different areas, and then each area was transformed into different environments and landforms. For example, the snow lotus grew in an extremely cold environment with snow falling all year round, and the Ninean grass grew in an environment with more yin and less yang. Some spiritual herbs only appeared in specific seasons, and when they were not in this season, they would hibernate underground to absorb spiritual qi. There were also some special spiritual herbs that lived in the desert and on the cliffs, and some spiritual herbs only grew best in the bottom of the water. Lin Feng took the lead, and Yang Qing helped from the side. The two of them redivided the herb valley into different areas, and then created different environments such as hills, dangerous peaks, snowy valleys, dark caves, and ponds. Then, they divided the various spiritual herbs in the herb valley into different types and transplanted them to the areas that were most suitable for their growth and reproduction. After dealing with the problems in the herb valley, Lin Feng turned to look at Yang Qing and said with a smile, "Little Qingzi, get ready. Those who pass the assessment this time might come to your side to be the cold stove." Yang Qing's expression was still calm, and he nodded. "Disciple will try my best. It's just that after this matter, Disciple wants to try to form his gold core, and in the near future, I'm afraid I'll delay the true disciple under my tutelage." Lin Feng said with a smile, "No matter, when the time comes, I'll let Xiaoyi and the others help you take care of it." After he told Yang Qing about the method Kong Nanhua used to try to break through the difficulty of life and death on the eve of his gold core formation, the young man really clenched his teeth and ran to try it. He sealed his magic power and cultivation level, and went to play all kinds of dangerous actions that, in Lin Feng's opinion, were extreme sports and above, but he wasn't completely courting death yet. Of course, with Lin Feng watching over him, it was impossible to really let Yang Qing play himself to death, but the danger involved was really no less than fighting to the death with a cultivator who was stronger than him. There might not necessarily be a return when there was effort, but it didn't mean there was no return either. Countless times of tempering gave Yang Qing a lot more courage when facing the problem of life and death. However, the problem of his willpower still existed. Not fearing death was a manifestation of high willpower, but not fearing death was not the same as having high willpower. Fortunately, it shouldn't be a big problem for him to challenge the gold core formation. For Yang Qing, if his state of mind grew, it would be much easier for him to improve his Tao. After encouraging Yang Qing a few more words, Lin Feng left the medicine valley, thinking as he walked. Generally speaking, the internal facilities and departments of power in a sect could be divided into 4 major categories: positive evidence, culture and education, law and morality, and creation. Positive evidence was in charge of the teaching, sorting, and creation of martial arts and spells, excavating the disciples' talent in fights of magical powers, presiding over the collection of information from all sides, and the related defense work of the sect. Culture and education was in charge of the research, annotation, and deduction of the Taoist scriptures. They guided the disciples in their cultivation and comprehension, organized the sect's literature, tackled academic problems, and so on. Law and morality was in charge of maintaining the sect's rules and regulations, supervising the disciples' conduct, evaluating their merits and demerits, giving suggestions for rewards and punishments, and participating in the sect's daily affairs, etiquette, and other administrative management. Creation was in charge of the customization and management of medicinal pills, magic tools, talismans, defensive equipment, and clothing. This kind of classification was popular in many sects, with specialized personnel in charge of the system, detailed division of labor, clear standards, and efficient and concise. It was just that the disciples who came out of this kind of environment were like the students in the schools on Earth in Lin Feng's previous life. Although it was efficient, it was more suitable for a large-scale universal education, and not suitable for elite education. Although the master led the way in the path of cultivation, the cultivation depended on the individual, but it was not a lie to say that a great master produces a great disciple. The master's careful cultivation and guidance of the disciple was often not just a few simple lectures. It was to carry out a deep understanding of the disciple, tailor a cultivation plan for the disciple, and put it into practice, constantly monitoring to ensure that the disciple did not deviate from the track, or if there was a sudden change, the master could adjust in time and not go down the dark path. Of course, the master was not a babysitter, but the effort that the master put into a disciple who passed on his mantle was definitely huge. Taking Lin Feng as an example, he taught Xiao Yin, Shi Tianhao, Zhu Yi, and other direct disciples. Although he only taught them the Book of Heaven and Tao, and then encouraged them to comprehend the Tao on their own, the effort that he spent on each of them in other aspects was not little. This kind of pouring of effort, 3 or 2 could be done, and 8 or 10 could barely do it. Any more, and they would not be able to bear it. No one had that much energy. If there were hundreds or even thousands, they would not be able to take care of them, even if they were exhausted to death. Therefore, Lin Feng decided to adopt the disciple assessment system that he was currently adopting. The policy was to adopt the universal education method for the foundation disciples, and then adopt the elite education method for the true disciples. The 4 aspects of demonstration, culture and education, law and morality, and creation, were arranged by Lin Feng to the 4 people, Shi Tianhao, Wang Lin, Zhu Yi, and Xiao Yan respectively. Yu Hongyan assisted Shi Tianhao, and Yang Qing assisted Xiao Yan. The few of them played the role of a general manager. For now, they were temporarily in charge. As their true disciples grew up in the future, these things would inevitably be handed over. After all, although the organization was stationed on Yujing Mountain, the target group was actually the disciples on Yinfeng Peak. For these 4 major categories, there were still many aspects that needed to be supplemented. The demonstration aspect needed the martial arts arena and the trial ground. The culture and education aspect needed to accelerate time cultivation. In the Xintian time cave, the spiritual energy at a time was limited, and it could not accommodate too many people. Moreover, it was not worth it to use 100 times acceleration on ordinary disciples. What needed to be supplemented was the kind of accelerated time cave that could accelerate 3 to 5 times, but had a large enough capacity to facilitate the cultivation of a large number of disciples. This was difficult, but it was not necessary. But if it was, it would definitely benefit the development of the sect. There is no shortage of law and morality, but the various sect rules needed to be perfected as soon as possible. Lin Feng himself had set up simple big commandments. Later, Zhu Yi took over in this aspect and formulated many derivative-related small commandments. It would be fine as long as it continued to be perfected. The place for law enforcement, execution, detention, and punishment was not in a hurry at the moment, but it should be put forward. In terms of creation, the equipment refining pavilion's Lin Feng had already taken out the construction token from the system, and the remaining talisman making could also be considered. Talisman was very useful in fights between low-level cultivators, and it could even be used as a trump card to protect oneself. Actually, it's not in a hurry. Lin Feng shook his head and laughed. Even if they were all built to make these things operate in an organized system, we still need manpower. At least a few generations of disciples will have to grow up before these departments can be fully operated. But the framework can be set up first. When the time comes, there will be laws to rely on, and success will come naturally. Lin Feng pondered and smiled leisurely. A lofty building is built from the ground up. 5 days passed quickly, and the assessment of the foundational disciples was about to begin. Lin Feng's divine sense swept across the people on the cloud peak below, and finally his attention stopped on Luo Qingwu and Li Yuanfang. Come on, little friends. Whether it's a mule or a horse, let's take a walk. Chapter 610. The day of the test was approaching. The sun had just risen from the horizon and revealed a faint light. Lin Feng used his mana, and purple gas broke through the void and landed on the peak of Kunlun Mountain in the boundless world. A group of foundational disciples was already waiting there. Silently, they watched the purple gas fall and condense into a purple crystal-like pagoda. The pagoda sat on the empty ground at the top of the mountain. It was as tall as the clouds and seemed to connect to the void. Lin Feng's voice rang in the sky. Those who are interested in participating in the test can enter this pagoda and climb up on their own. In one day, before sunrise tomorrow morning, those who can reach the top of the pagoda and climb up Yujing Mountain will pass the test and become a true disciple of our sect. Everyone looked at the purple pagoda that looked like a road to heaven and gasped. It's that high. The void beside them broke open and Zhu Yi's figure appeared. He glanced at the slightly restless crowd, and everyone immediately quieted down. The test is to test your potential, not your current cultivation level. The pagoda was built by the ancestors' mana. Everyone who enters will have their cultivation level suppressed to the level of an ordinary person. Even so, those who have cultivated before will naturally have an easier time. So whether or not you want to participate in the test is completely up to your own choice. Someone walked out of the crowd and bowed to Zhu Yi. Elder Zhu, forgive me for being presumptuous. This pagoda is so high that I'm afraid even foundational cultivators can't climb to the top in one day. Zhu Yi said calmly, you don't have to worry about that. The space inside the pagoda is special. It's different from what you see outside the pagoda. Those who are skilled can easily climb up. Everyone nodded slowly, but some people were sneaking glances at Dao Yuding. There were no walls in the world that didn't have ears. The news that Dao Yuding and Dao Jiqiang were father and daughter had spread from 1 to 10 and from 10 to 100. Many people knew about it. I wonder if she went through the back door? A lot of people were muttering in their hearts. Originally, Dao Yuding's cultivation level was in the late stage of the foundation building realm, and all of them combined couldn't compare to her. Now that she was also participating in the assessment, many people's hearts were beating like drums. Hearing that everyone's cultivation would be suppressed to the level of an ordinary person, everyone could not help but heave a sigh of relief. But then they began to worry that Dao Jiqiang would leak the question to his daughter. Even if Dao Jiqiang didn't know the secret of the purple pagoda, Zhu Yi, Xiao Yin, and the others would definitely know, since they were so familiar with it. Who knew if they would take care of Dao Yuding? Or perhaps the faction gave special treatment to Dao Yuding on account of Dao Jiqiang's hard work. She didn't need any explicit help. As long as she gave some pointers, Dao Yuding would have the upper hand. However, these thoughts were buried in the bottom of their hearts. No one was stupid enough to show it. At the moment, Dao Jiqiang was the head supervisor of the outer sanctum. In reality, he had quite a lot of power. Even true disciples like Su Yunsheng and the others couldn't easily offend him. They were not afraid of Dao Jiqiang's revenge, but who knew if they would ask him for help? Moreover, not mentioning Dao Jiqiang, Dao Yuding's cultivation level was also very high. Zhu Yi glanced at them indifferently. He took in everyone's gazes and actions, but he didn't pay much attention to them. This was already within his expectations. Having personally experienced the Wilderness Sea Assembly, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Yu Hongyan, and the others all agreed that Dao Yuding was a real genius. Time would prove everything. How could Dao Yuding not notice the strange gazes of others? It was just that she had a cold personality. Although she recovered her memory and reunited with Dao Jiqiang and his daughter, which made her more cheerful, she still tended to be quiet when she was with most people. Her thinking was also very simple. Words were always pale, and facts spoke louder than words. Not to mention that she was confident in herself. Her father, Dao Jiqiang, really didn't give her any backdoor. This experienced head supervisor of the outer sanctum was very clear about what should be done and what should not be done. At this moment, Lin Feng's voice sounded in the sky again. Those who can reach the top of the pagoda and ascend Yujing Mountain before midnight today can be my direct disciple. His voice was very calm, but it instantly set off a huge wave. On the top of the cloud peak, even with Zhu Yi by his side, he couldn't suppress the excitement of a group of foundational disciples. The group of young people were so excited that their eyes turned red. Becoming Lin Feng's direct disciple meant that they would be ranked behind Xiao Yin and the others. Receiving personal education and guidance from Lin Feng was like reaching the sky in one step. Looking at the human cultivation world in the Divine Land, who didn't know that Lin Feng was one of the top figures in the entire Divine Land. Even the current temple master of Taishu Temple, Yin Nan Lai, and the current sect master of Mount Shu Sword Sect, Xian Longsheng, were not as famous as him. Becoming Lin Feng's direct disciple meant that one's status in the entire Xianmen Tianzong would be very different. Naturally, the resources one could enjoy would be different as well. Moreover, The entire great heaven primordial world recognized that Lin Feng's direct disciples were all monstrous geniuses. Anyone who could be accepted as a direct disciple by Lin Feng would definitely be a genius among geniuses. There was no exception. Those who dared to question this had long been slapped swollen by Xiao Yin, Wang Lin, and the others, to the point that even their parents wouldn't be able to recognize them. Reaching the sky in one step, truly reaching the sky in one step. As soon as these words came out, not to mention these foundational disciples, even the few true disciples on Yujing Mountain trembled. Su Yinsheng, Lu Xiaofeng, Li Xingfei, and Xiao Huan were still fine, but Ying Luojia's eyes immediately lit up. Little fatty Yin Wuwei was also a little dazed. Next to them, Xiao Yin turned his head and looked at them with a smile that was not a smile. He teased, "Oh, what's wrong? Are you all tempted? Do you want to get rid of your master and climb up to someone else?" Yin Wuwei's fat body trembled, and he hurriedly said, "How could that be? Master, a master for a day is a father for life. How could disciple have such rebellious thoughts?" He paused, then said seriously, "Moreover, when we first took the test, the ancestor once said that anyone who performed well could become his direct disciple. It's just that none of us met the requirements." Yin Wuwei laughed bitterly, especially this disciple. Among those who passed the purple chi maze, I was the one at the bottom. I only managed to pass the test by relying on luck. Later on, Master took me in as your disciple, which is why I have the status of a true disciple today. How could I dare to ask for more? At the side, Ying Rosa said straightforwardly, "Eldest martial uncle, please understand. Back then, disciple indeed hoped to become a true disciple of the ancestor, but since I'm not capable enough, there's nothing to complain about. Now that I'm under Master's tutelage, it's also very good. But disciple would like to ask, is this purple pagoda in front of us the same as the purple chi maze that we took the test in? Is the difficulty the same?" Xiao Yin did not take offense to his question, saying indifferently, "This pagoda is different from the maze back then, but it is also a comprehensive examination of all aspects. If I really had to say, the difficulty is probably a bit higher." He chuckled. "If you're interested, the few of you can also go in and give it a try." With that said, not only Ying Rosa, but Lu Xiaofeng and Xiao Huan also looked eager to try. They did not necessarily want to compete, but mostly just wanted to test themselves. Yin Wuwei was a little hesitant. If they also entered the purple pagoda, it would be fine if their results were good, but if they did not, it would be a little embarrassing. Moreover, if they could not reach the top of the pagoda before sunrise tomorrow morning and did not meet the standards of a true disciple, it would be too embarrassing. Lu Xiaofeng seemed to know what he was thinking. He turned to look at him and shook his head slightly. Yin Wuwei was shocked. He had not even tried, but he had already lost confidence. This kind of state of mind was not desirable. Li Xingfei looked at the purple pagoda silently and said, "Disciple also wants to give it a try. It's a test set by the ancestor himself. It's a rare experience to experience more. Even if I suffer setbacks, I'll still gain something." Xiao Yin smiled. "If that's the case, then all of you can go too." At this moment, a group of foundational disciples had already entered the purple pagoda at the top of the cloud peak. Not only were there chi refinement disciples, but there were also many people with poor foundations. Anyway, everyone's cultivation would be suppressed to the level of ordinary people. They were all carrying one head on their shoulders. So who was afraid of who? Although Zhu Yi had already explained that even if their cultivation was suppressed, those who had cultivated before would have an advantage, many people still entered the purple pagoda. Whether it was Lin Feng, Zhu Yi, or the others, they would not think that they did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. It was not a bad thing to be enterprising and daring to try. Those who were opportunistic and took advantage of the situation would naturally be taught a lesson. As soon as everyone entered the purple pagoda, those who had cultivated before immediately realized that their cultivation had been completely lost. Li Yuanfang and Dao Yuding, who were at the foundation establishment stage, felt the same. They only felt that they had become ordinary people and the Taoist foundation in their bodies seemed to have disappeared. Even the strength of their divine senses and the vitality of their souls were suppressed to the level before they learned Taoist techniques. It was not a bit more or less, and it was very detailed. At the same time, abundant spiritual qi surrounded them like an ocean, drowning them. Such abundant spiritual qi was even denser than the natural state of Jade Capital Mountain. Li Yuanfang stood still. After sensing carefully, he came to a conclusion. Everything is as bad as falling short. If the concentration of spiritual qi is too high, ordinary people's bodies will not be able to withstand it. It will cause great pressure and burden. We must rely on ourselves to convert it in time. Otherwise, it will be like falling into a muddy swamp, and we will not be able to move an inch. Luo Qingwu, Dao Yuding, Zhuge Wanxiu, and the others also came to the same conclusion. This is a test of our innate bone structure and physical quality. At this time, the better the bone structure, the faster the body can convert spiritual qi and thus advance faster. Before entering, Zhu Yi had explained the way of neutralizing qi to everyone. Therefore, everyone began to work hard and try to advance. Soon, they realized that the higher they went, the higher the concentration of spiritual qi. At this time, the quality of one's physical quality became more and more important. The stronger one's physical quality was, the stronger one's resistance to pressure would be, and it would be easier to advance in the rich spiritual qi. As they walked, everyone soon realized that other than the rich spiritual qi, there were other tests waiting for them. Just as Xiaoyan said, the Purple Pagoda was a comprehensive test for them. Chapter 611. In the special environment of the Purple Pagoda, everyone had to concentrate and dispel the pressure brought by the dense spiritual qi. They could only rely on themselves to move forward and could not count on others to help them. In just a short while, the gap between everyone gradually became apparent. Luo Qingwu, who had the highest aptitude among the group, walked at the front of everyone. Because of the conflict between Yu Hongyan and Bai Shiqian, Luo Qingwu gradually became known in West Hill City. Many people knew about her top-notch pure yin body after it was exposed. At this moment, seeing that Luo Qingwu even had the energy to look around curiously, most people sighed in their hearts. It's really infuriating to compare yourself with others. The group gradually began to be divided. Luo Qingwu walked to the front, followed closely by Dao Yuding. Her speed was not much slower than Luo Qingwu's, and sometimes she would even surpass Luo Qingwu. Although her aptitude was inferior, Dao Yuding had, after all, cultivated to the late stage of foundation establishment. Even if her cultivation was suppressed, she still had an advantage. However, as time passed, Luo Qingwu became more and more accustomed to the environment in the pagoda. The innate advantage of the pure yin body became stronger and stronger. It became easier for her to dispel the pressure of the spiritual qi in the environment. Even Dao Yuding began to be unable to keep up with her. The two women walked at the forefront, and Li Yuanfang and Zhuge Wanxiu followed behind them. There were also a pair of people with slightly higher cultivation bases and slightly stronger innate bones, so their speed was basically the same. Behind them was the majority of the group. There were also slightly more outstanding leaders who followed closely behind Li Yuanfang and Zhuge Wanxiu. On the other hand, Su Yunsheng and the others who entered the pagoda slightly later began to catch up with the others and even began to overtake them. Su Yunsheng, Ying Luojia, and Zhao Huan, who was also known as Xiao Huan, were the three who were chasing the fastest. Li Xingfei, Lu Xiaofeng, and Yin Wuwei were also not slow and followed closely behind. Seeing them come in, the group of Foundation disciples revealed surprised expressions. Some of the first batch of disciples to join the sect and were familiar with them hurriedly asked, "Why are you guys here too?" Yin Wuwei waved his hand at them and said, "This is a test set by the Patriarch, and it's a rare opportunity. We're only here to verify our cultivation, and it won't affect the final result. Even if we only use 2 hours to reach the top of the pagoda, it's the same as arriving tomorrow morning. As the group moved forward, layers upon layers of tests began one after another. In the air, rays of golden light fell one after another, hitting the people who were climbing. This treasure light directly penetrated their bodies and bombarded their souls. It was to test the strength and toughness of their souls. The excessively dense spiritual chi was used to examine the aptitude of the fleshly body, and these precious lights were used to examine the aptitude of the divine soul. They were both important embodiments of one's root bone. The treasure light wasn't very strong, and it was impossible for it to destroy one's soul in an instant. However, it wasn't an easy hurdle to pass, especially when the treasure light bombarded one after another. It was like an endless sea wave. The suppression of spiritual chi and the bombardment of the treasure light were carried out at the same time. The difficulty of the test was instantly raised by more than one level, and the disciples had to be even more careful. This was just the beginning. Closely after, the third test also appeared. The staircase in front of the crowd began to diverge, and it was no longer a single path to the end. There is only one correct path among the diverging paths, and the disciples participating in the test had to eliminate the interferences and find the correct path among them. This was a test of the disciples' perception and sensitivity to the fluctuations of spiritual chi. It corresponded to the process of cultivation. The stronger and more sensitive one's perception, the easier it would be for them to absorb the spiritual chi from outside their bodies into their bodies for cultivation. However, dispelling the dense spiritual chi suppression while resisting the attacks of the treasure light and still being able to calm down to find the correct path was no longer a test of one's root bone. It was also a test of one's willpower. Only those with strong willpower, high stability, and calmness could quickly find the correct path under such adverse circumstances. Every fork in the road had Lin Feng's mana restriction. Once they came here, even if they were holding hands and supporting each other, they would instantly fall into a situation of being alone. At this time, they could only rely on themselves to choose the path. Amidst the swirling fog of light, the latecomers could not see which path the people in front had chosen. The difficulty of the test kept increasing, and the division of the team became more and more obvious. The queue grew longer and longer, and as time passed, people even began to gradually fall behind. On Jade Capital Mountain, Xiao Yin and the others were standing in the Hall of All Heavens. Lin Feng was also sitting on the main seat. Everyone looked at the scene in the light together. The pictures flashed quickly, showing the situation of one disciple after another. "What will happen if we are thrown in?" Xiao Yin asked with a smile, and the people around him also smiled. Zhu Yi was the first to speak. "So far, the main thing is to carefully test one's root bone." When Master was outside West Hill City, and now the purple chi stairs that are left under the cloud peak as the mountain gate, they only set a standard for the test of aptitude. Now, it is a comprehensive and thorough test. Sure, Tianhao said with a smile. "These are just the basics. The next step is to broaden their horizons." "Am I right, Master?" Lin Feng smiled without saying a word. At this moment, the scene in the light suddenly changed. The disciples who were in the process of climbing all looked confused. Only a few people, such as Li Yuanfeng, frowned, but their eyes were still clear. On the basis of the previous test, the 7 emotions and 6 desires transformation was added. The 7 emotions and 6 desires transformation was used as a weapon to silently sneak into one's mind, break one's defenses, and confuse one's soul, making it difficult for one to extricate themselves from the illusion. On the purple chi stairs outside West Hill City, Lin Feng mainly sifted the sand, so he simply shook the souls and dug out the evil spirits in the hearts of the tested. The current illusion was of a higher level and richer. It didn't necessarily trigger only the dark side of people's hearts. It could also trigger many positive emotions, such as longing for one's family, love for one's lover, pursuit of one's ideals, and so on. This test used the 7 emotions and 6 desires as weapons to silently sneak into people's minds, break their defenses, and confuse their souls, making it difficult for them to extricate themselves from the illusion. The 7 emotions and 6 desires were human nature. With the cultivations of the disciples in the tower, no one could completely cut off the 7 emotions and 6 desires, so this method was almost unsolvable. Relatively speaking, people with a strong soul and a firm will were less likely to be moved by external things. They could see through the truth and avoid being invaded by external illusions. This trial was a test of the disciples' temperament and willpower. The years of cultivation were endless, and all kinds of chaotic thoughts, whether positive or negative, could become obstacles and difficulties in cultivation. Only those with strong willpower could walk on this path for a long time. The threshold of Xianmen Tianzong was not low, it could even be said to be very high. Those who could be accepted by Xianmen Tianzong could be called talents with potential. But the people who participated in the test were generally only 15 or 16 years old, or even younger. This was the age of youth. How many people could maintain their unwavering will and not be moved by external things and external demons? So on the way up, the overall speed of the team became slower and slower. Illusions appeared before everyone's eyes. Although they kept telling themselves that this was a test for them and that it was a fake illusion, they still could not stop their hearts from shaking. Some fell into the Azura killing field and became fearful. Some fell into the heavenly paradise and wholeheartedly enjoyed the wonder of immortality. And some fell into the human world, hugging women left and right, unaware of the passage of time. All of these seemed to be illusions, but they were actually transformed from the bottom of the hearts of the people being tested. Therefore, the 6 senses of color, sound, taste, and touch were all present. For the people being tested, it was an incomparably real world. This test was mysterious and unpredictable, instantly making most of the people fall into the changes of the 7 emotions and 6 desires, unable to extricate themselves. The light and shadows in the all-heavens great hall changed like a lantern. It was no longer just showing the real scene, but the illusions in the hearts of the people being tested were also appearing one after another. The scene suddenly stopped. Xiao Yin and the others stared at the scene and shook their heads slightly. This person probably knew that he would be seen through, but in order to avoid suspicion of a guilty conscience, he still participated in the test. However, it's not good to be lucky. If you dare to come in, you will definitely be exposed. Although you have already been exposed long ago. Lin Feng had already told them about the first batch of disciples mixing in the sand. As for the specific target, they all knew in their hearts. However, when they saw it now, they still felt that it was a pity. After all, he was one of the rare talents among the second-generation disciples. Master, if this person can be seen through, then why does the other person seem to have no movement at all? Shi Tianhao turned his head and asked curiously. Lin Feng smiled slightly. The Taishu Temple is more brilliant than the Great Zhou dynasty. The spy they planted probably doesn't even know the task he is shouldering. Right now, he has not been activated, but there must be a way to control him. When the time comes, he can be activated at the crucial moment. Lin Feng smiled. However, with some clues, we can still see through this person's background. Don't worry, you all just need to know. Shi Tianhao asked, during the second opening of the mountain gate to recruit disciples. Will there also be this kind of hidden spy that even the person himself doesn't know about? Lin Feng smiled. Yes, but when we were outside West Hill City, I have already removed it. For this kind of sand, it is enough to leave 1 or 2 to facilitate one's own operation. If there are too many, it will be troublesome enough. Shi Tianhao and the others all nodded and no longer spoke. Their attention returned to the assessment. After the test of triggering illusions that targeted the 7 emotions and 6 sensory pleasures was launched, the impact on the disciples participating in the assessment was very obvious. Most people began to walk with difficulty. While fighting against the illusions, they struggled to move forward. In the leading group, Luo Qingwu, who had always been the vanguard, gradually slowed down. The others were also more or less affected. Only Li Yuanfang's speed remained stable. Under the situation where the speed of the others gradually slowed down, it was obvious that Li Yuanfang's speed had increased. First, Zhuge Wanqiu fell further and further behind him. Then, even Dao Yuding was almost caught up by him. The few of them were also affected by the illusions. All kinds of illusions kept appearing in their minds. Chapter 6:12. Lin Feng observed the leading group with interest and saw that they were also troubled by endless illusions. Daddy, Mommy, Six Grandpa, and Grandpa, Great-Grandpa, the scenes that emerged in the mind of the little lowly Luo Qingwu were rather chaotic. One moment, she was surrounded by many loved ones, and everyone loved and doted on her. The next moment, everyone was coldly leaving her. No matter how she called out to them, they ignored her. These images alternated, intertwined with some of the treasures that had grown up with her, the surprise of regaining what she had lost, and the sadness of losing what she had gained. The next moment, the images changed again. First, she failed to become a disciple of Xianmin Tianzong, and her heart only felt cold and desperate. Then, she successfully passed the ongoing assessment and cheered on Yujing Mountain. The little girl bit her lip and moved forward step by step. She was still young, and her temperament had not been determined. She was lively and active, and usually liked to let her imagination run wild, so it was easy for her to be troubled by illusions. Fortunately, her mental potential was not low. She had a stubborn and resolute temperament, so she could stick to her heart and control herself. In addition, her bone talent was really outstanding, so she did not have to worry too much about the bone talent test. This allowed her to focus more energy on calming her mind and fighting against the illusions. On the other hand, Li Yuanfang was just the opposite. He had a firm will and rarely had illusions. They only happened occasionally. Sometimes the top formations such as the yin and yang life and death formation, the Vairocana formation, the supreme void yin and yang formation, and the great immortal nature sword formation were placed in front of him, allowing him to study them. Sometimes his first teacher, ancestor He too, actually appeared in front of him, as if he had just gone on a long trip and returned, looking at him with a smile. Other times, Ding Runfeng from Taishu Temple suddenly appeared with a faint smile, full of mockery. He said to him word by word, "Aren't you a disciple of Xianmin Tianzong? What are you doing here?" Li Yuanfang was expressionless as he closed his eyes. A second later, he opened them again. His eyes were clear, and the illusion in his mind had disappeared. He didn't stop and continued forward. Compared to Luo Qingwu, he spent more time on dispelling the spiritual qi and defending against the attacks of the treasured light. Dao Yuding walked up the stairs of the pagoda, dispelling all kinds of restrictions while resisting the erosion of the heart demon's illusions. She had a strong will, but the things she had experienced were much more complicated than others. After being separated from his father, Dao Jiqiang, for so many years, he was finally able to reunite with him. This was a joyous feeling. However, his mother had died in the hands of the Sky Pond sect cultivators. This was a feeling of grief and indignation. Whether it was happiness or sadness, positive or negative, it would cause illusions to appear and disturb her mind. Sometimes, Song Qingyuan's image would suddenly appear. That was the fear in the depths of Dao Yuding's heart. After the destruction of the Sky Pond sect, she reunited with her father and became Xianmin Tianzong's disciple. This fear had gradually disappeared, but it resurfaced again at this moment. Not long after Dao Yuding was accepted as a disciple of the Sky Pond sect, she knew that the seemingly gentle and amiable young man was actually cruel and ruthless. He would be her Dao companion in the future, and their natural endowments complemented each other. The Sky Pond sect's idea was that after Dao Yuding formed her gold core, she could marry Song Qingyuan, and the two of them could cultivate together. However, whenever Dao Yuding thought of Song Qingyuan, she would shudder all over. She was even afraid of forming her gold core and deliberately avoided it. The great Dao of golden elixir, which ordinary cultivators dreamed of, terrified her. She wasn't afraid of the difficulty of forming her gold core. On the contrary, she was afraid of what she had to face after forming her gold core. Dao Yuding shook her head forcefully. She felt as if she was facing a poisonous snake. The creepy, cold, and slippery feeling was forcibly expelled from her mind. She stabilized her state of mind and continued to work hard to climb. Zhuge Wanxiu, who had climbed extremely fast in the early stage and was also in the first echelon, seemed to have fallen behind at this time. She was left far behind by Luo Qingwu, Li Yuanfang, and Dao Yuding. Her thoughts and experiences weren't complicated, but she didn't have enough willpower. Even a small thing in her memory could trigger a layer of illusion. When she was young, she caught a few spiritual birds. The little beasts she raised died of illness. She was separated from her father, and so on. Because her emotions weren't particularly intense, the illusion was also very ordinary, and the little girl could quickly get rid of it. However, such things kept happening one after another, as if there was no end to it. Fortunately, her foundation was very outstanding, especially the spirituality and sensitivity of her spirit. She almost never hesitated when she encountered a fork in the road and could immediately find the right direction. That was why she was barely able to stay at the front of the group. After a long period of climbing, Su Yinsheng, Lu Xiaofeng, and the other true disciples had already surpassed the majority of the group. They were also at the front of the group and were not too far away from Zhuge Wanxiu, who was at the end of the first echelon. They and a few other more outstanding foundation disciples formed the second echelon. As they continued to move forward, they gradually reached the front of the second echelon. Although they were also troubled by the illusion of the heart demon, they continued to climb while resisting the illusion and enduring the bombardment of spiritual qi and treasure light. At this point, everyone's speed was actually very slow. Luo Qingwu, Li Yuanfang, and the others were actually moving forward slowly, step by step. More than half of the group had already completely fallen behind. They were either trapped by the heart demon, or they were distracted by resisting the heart demon and could not withstand the pressure of spiritual qi and the bombardment of treasure light. However, although most of them had been eliminated, overall, the results of the assessment so far were still satisfactory to Lin Feng. His assessment was not easy to begin with. To put it crudely, he used his purple pagoda that was condensed from mana to test the younger generation of all the sects in the world. Other than Taishu and Shushan, who were slightly better, there were very few descendants from other places who could pass. It was also very normal for the sects to be completely annihilated after the assessment. However, there were also things that happened that made Lin Feng not know whether to laugh or cry. For example, there was a young man on the stairs who was completely crazy and had already lost control. He was actually completely immersed in the illusion of the heart demon and could not break free. Power. With great power. No one will look down on me anymore. Ha ha ha. The young man laughed out loud and shouted. He was full of words like he was invincible. He would take all the beauties in the world, and he would kill all those who were not pleasing to his eyes. When Lin Feng heard this, he was speechless. He used mana to cover the young man the moment he went crazy. This way, he would not let the other disciples who were participating in the assessment see him lose his composure, so that everyone would not be embarrassed when he woke up. He took a look at the talent detector. The young man's foundation and power of understanding were not bad. He even had 7 points of luck, which was considered to be low for most people, which was already quite good. The only problem was that his willpower was low. He was born into a poor family and was used to being bullied. As a result, his emotions accumulated to a certain extent, and he was completely detonated by the mana restriction in the purple pagoda. Sigh, there will always be fish that slip through the net. Lin Feng shook his head and began to seriously consider. As the purple cheese stares at the foot of the mountain gate, he had to further strengthen the test of temperament. Previously, he only checked for spies, which was a little lacking. It was true that this young man had gone crazy and lost control because he had triggered his inner demons. However, with his state of mind, it was easy for him to be like a wolf in the mountains and become arrogant when he succeeded. However, since he had already been accepted into the sect, Lin Feng could tolerate him. It all depended on whether the teaching was good or not. If it was good enough, he could slowly correct it. Xiao Yi. Pay attention to this person. Don't worry too much, but the sect rules must be strictly enforced. Rewards and punishments must be clear. Zhu Yi and the others also looked like they did not know whether to laugh or cry. Zhu Yi listened to Lin Feng's instructions and immediately nodded. Education without discrimination, disciple understands. Shi Tianhao laughed at the side and said, "This young man is really ambitious. It's a pity that he definitely can't pass master's test. Otherwise, I would want to accept him." The others curled their lips together. Everyone had the same expression, expressing the same meaning. If he followed you, he would be completely hopeless. The few of them joked around for a while, but the people in the pagoda still had to continue climbing, facing the pressure of spiritual energy and the bombardment of treasure light. While searching for the path, they also had to resist the layers of illusions caused by the 7 emotions and 6 desires. The group of foundational disciples climbed the stairs in the purple pagoda with difficulty. The endless tests almost left them with no time to think, and they lost the concept of time. All their attention was used to deal with the various mana prohibitions in the pagoda. Time passed quickly, and the sky gradually darkened. For the few people in the lead group, the top of the pagoda was already in sight for them. In the end, it was still Luo Qingwu who was the first to reach the top. The top of the pagoda was a vast space, and a path was in front of her, leading to a shining spell formation. According to Zhu Yi's instructions, stepping on the spell formation would transport them to Jade Capital Mountain, and, at the same time, it meant that they had passed the test. However, a white light barrier blocked in front of them, cutting off the path, allowing Luo Qingwu to get close to the spell formation. Hundreds of white streams of light floated around the barrier, looking like hanging silk ribbons. Luo Qingwu stopped, curiously sizing up the barrier and the streams of light. At that moment, footsteps came from behind her, and when she turned back, she saw that it was Li Yuanfang. The two of them basically reached the top of the pagoda one after the other, and Dao Yuding was overtaken by Li Yuanfang. Li Yuanfang also came to the barrier, looking at the floating streams of light with a serious expression. After thinking for a while, he reached out his hand to touch the streams of light. The streams of light did not dissipate, but instead seemed to have a physical form, landing on Li Yuanfang's palm. "This is a name." Li Yuanfang looked at the words flashing in the streams of light. It was a name, and he thought for a while, remembering that this was a disciple who was participating in the test. After checking the rest of the light ribbons, sure enough, he saw that each of the ribbons had a person's name on it. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu quickly found the ribbons with their names on them. As soon as their own ribbons were in their hands, they saw another line of words appear behind their names, but it was a simple question. Luo Qingwu softly read, "The end of pure Yin." There were only 4 words on the ribbons, but it seemed that there was more to it. Does it mean that Xiao Wu has to find the answer herself? Luo Qingwu stroked the ribbons, thinking in her heart. Beside her, Li Yuanfang was also deep in thought, but his ribbons had a different content. River and Luo intersect. Chapter 613. On the barrier in front of the examinees, ribbons of light flowed down like silk ribbons. Each ribbon had a person's name imprinted on it. When the owner of the name touched the ribbon, a question would appear. Every question pointed to a big problem that the owner of the name had faced in his cultivation. This round of the test required the examinee to think about the answers to the questions themselves. They did not necessarily require a standard answer, but they had to have their own understanding and understanding. Knowing oneself and distinguishing oneself was a very important point on the path of cultivation. At the same time, this trial was also a test of everyone's comprehension ability. It was a test of their comprehension ability. Silently, Luo Qingwu and Li Yuanfang pondered over the question carefully. Just then, they heard footsteps behind them. Dao Yuding had also arrived at the top of the pagoda. In terms of foundation and will, she wasn't any worse than Luo Qingwu or Li Yuanfang. However, because of her personal experience, the demons in her heart were much heavier, so it naturally took her more time to get rid of them. Dao Yuding arrived in front of the barrier. Luo Qingwu gave her some pointers, and she began to look for her own streamer. After she found it, she saw 4 words appear behind her name. Zhenyang is poor. This problem was actually not a difficult one, but the most awkward part of Dao Yuding's cultivation process. Speaking of which, her physique was special. As a woman, her primordial yin was overflowing with true yang, but it was not a perfect yin and yang coexisting body like Yang Qing. She was still some distance away from the true balance of yin and yang. Her true yang was naturally more vigorous than other women, but she was still a little short of achieving the perfect balance of yin and yang. Of course, it was possible to cultivate yin-attributed Dao techniques. However, it was definitely not as good as Luo Qingwu's pure yin body. It was not even as good as the heavenly accumulating spirit pearl. Cultivating Taoist arts of a yang attribute would result in an imbalance between yin and yang, which would easily cause her true yang, which was more abundant than normal women, to go out of control and cause spontaneous combustion. She didn't cultivate the Dao techniques of yin and yang. Her physique also had a lot of advantages, but more or less, it seemed to be a waste of her talent. The way of yin and yang of the void of the Taishu Temple and the North Flaming Sun spell of the Celestial Pool sect were the most suitable Taoist arts for her. However, she would encounter the same problem in the process of cultivation. True Yang was a bit lacking that bit of perfection. He was much more outstanding than normal people, but he lacked that final breath, making him feel a bit unwilling. That was why the Tianqi sect had planned to pair her with Song Qingyuan to cultivate together. Song Qingyuan's problem was exactly the opposite of hers. This was the solution provided by the Tianqi sect. Whether it was in theory or in practice, it was a reliable solution. The only problem was that they had to cultivate together. Even though Dao Yuding had always been against interacting with Song Qingyuan and was even afraid of core formation, she had no other choice. But looking at Lin Feng's words, it was clear that there was another way. Dao Yuding immediately began to think seriously. On the other side, Luo Qingwu and Li Yuanfang were also staring at their own problems and thinking hard. After a while, the 4th person arrived. It was Su Yunsheng, one of the true disciples. He nodded at the 3 people who had arrived earlier and went to look for his own streamer. Even though their assessment did not count, as long as they entered the Purple Pagoda to participate in the assessment, Lin Feng would have a problem to prepare for. In a sense, this problem was also a great harvest for Su Yunsheng and the others. Lin Feng had personally pointed out the major problems in their cultivation process. Su Yunsheng found his streamer. After seeing the problem clearly, he also began to think. After that, the others also arrived. After Su Yunsheng, Ing Rosa and Zhuge Wanqiu reached the top of the pagoda almost at the same time. Ing Rosa looked at Su Yunsheng with a dark expression. He walked to the front of the white barrier. Su Yunsheng looked up at him and said indifferently, "Find the one with your name on the barrier streamer. There are questions on it for everyone." After hearing this, Ing Rosa did not say a word and began to search. Zhuge Wanqiu said to Su Yunsheng, "Thank you, senior brother." Su Yunsheng shook his head. "No need to thank me. Hurry up." Zhuge Wanqiu immediately walked to the barrier and looked for the streamer with her name on it. As she was looking, Ing Rosa suddenly handed one over without raising his head. "It's yours. Take it." "Thank you, senior brother." Zhuge Wanqiu was slightly stunned. She hurriedly thanked him and took the streamer. She saw that there were 4 words after her name on it. Unstable soul. Ing Rosa did not say anything after that. He searched for a while and found his streamer. After seeing the problem on it, he sat on the ground and frowned slightly. He began to think. After a while, Li Xingfei, Lu Xiaofeng, and another new foundation disciple also reached the top of the pagoda. Not long after them, Zhao Huan and Yin Wuwei also arrived. In the following period of time, the second echelon of people began to reach the top of the pagoda. Everyone split up to look for their streamers and then began to seriously think about the problem on it. Someone suddenly asked, "What time is it now?" Everyone was stunned. Lu Xiaofeng glanced at him and said indifferently, "Let's solve the problem first." If we can't solve the problem, everything is useless. Everyone nodded and focused their attention on the problem again. The person who just spoke also nodded and hurriedly continued to think about the problem. Time passed bit by bit. On Jade Capital Mountain, Lin Feng and his disciples watched this scene with interest. Shi Tianhao suddenly smiled. I bet that Li Yuanfang will be the first to solve the problem. Who wants to bet with me? Xiaoyan rolled his eyes. Only an idiot would bet with you. They had interacted with Li Yuanfang many times and knew that this person's aptitude could only be considered superior, not top-notch, much less monstrous. But his comprehension is very high. Not only does he practice formations with Lin Feng, he also understands every day when discussing Dao techniques with Xiao Yin and the others, drawing inferences about other things from one instance. In his seriousness, he is full of intelligence. Shi Tianhao smiled and said, Then let's bet on whether he can solve the problem before midnight and become Master's personal disciple. Xiao Yin and the others looked at each other and became interested. This bet is finally a little interesting. Calculating the time, there were still 2 hours to midnight. Shi Tianhao immediately said, I bet that he can pass. Yang Qing, who usually interacted with Li Yuanfang the most, also nodded. I also think he can pass. Zhu Yi did not participate in the bet. Yu Hongyan thought about it and said, I also think he can pass. This is not good. I can't afford to bet. Xiaoyan held a grass stem in his mouth and put his hands behind his head. I'm also optimistic about his teeth. Shi Tianhao was a little dumbfounded and quickly looked at Wang Lin. Third senior brother? Wang Lin smiled. I can't afford to bet. The brothers stared at each other for a long time and all laughed at once. This means that we will have another junior brother. Xiaoyan rubbed his temples and suddenly felt a headache when he thought of Li Yuanfang's character. He smacked his lips and said, This guy is so long-winded. Shi Tianhao's eyes flashed. Xiaoyan glanced at him and laughed unscrupulously. Don't blink. He is older than you. According to what you said at the beginning, after he enters the sect, we will have another junior brother, and you will have another senior brother. You're a man. You have to keep your word. Shi Tianhao stuck out his tongue. At that time, I was not even 4 years old. At best, I could only be considered a little husband. As they laughed and joked, midnight arrived. There was less than an hour left. At this moment, Li Yuanfang, who had his eyes closed and was silent, suddenly opened his eyes. The expression on his dark and thin face did not change, but his eyes were bright. However, he did not get up. Instead, after counting the time with his fingers, he actually closed his eyes again and rested silently. What is he doing? Xiao Yin frowned slightly. Look at him. He has clearly solved the problem. Is he going to climb up the mountain at the last moment? In my impression, he is not someone who likes to play to the gallery. Yang Qing hesitated and said, Could it be that he wants to reorganize his thoughts, or think about whether there is more to gain? The others were also puzzled. Only Lin Feng, who had not spoken since the beginning, looked at the image of Li Yuanfang in the light and shadow illusion and roughly guessed what he was thinking. This young man thought that he had already received too much kindness from Lin Feng. Therefore, he wanted to start from a low position and repay the sect step by step. He did not want to reach the sky in a single step. His way of thinking might seem ridiculous, pretentious, and awkward in the eyes of others, but Li Yuanfang really thought so. He had his own set of standards, and he did not require others to follow him, but he himself would strictly abide by them. Lin Feng shook his head slightly and passed a transcendence energy sound transmission to Li Yuanfang. Discern the inner heart and do not bother about trifles. Different positions have different sceneries. Li Yuanfang was slightly stunned and lowered his head in contemplation. Lin Feng closed his mouth after saying this. It was not that he had to accept Li Yuanfang as a direct disciple, but with Li Yuanfang's character, if he continued to develop in the future, it would be detrimental to his cultivation. Since Li Yuanfang had become Xianmin Tianzong's disciple, even if he was not his direct disciple, Lin Feng would still remind him. However, everyone had their own fate. Whether he listened or not, it was Li Yuanfang's own business. Fortunately, Although Li Yuanfang was strict and rigid and appeared stubborn in many areas, he was reasonable. He could clearly distinguish who was good to him and who was bad to him. Back when he was under Patriarch He Tu's tutelage, Patriarch He Tu corrected his habit of pointing out the mistakes of others. Thus, Li Yuanfang was able to listen to his advice. In the future, as long as others did not take the initiative to find trouble with him, he would rarely be as disrespectful as he was in the beginning. Now that he had listened to Lin Feng's guidance, Li Yuanfang stood up after thinking for a while and reached out to hold the streamer of light with his name written on it. The answer to the question was transmitted to the streamer through his thoughts. Li Yuanfang pulled hard, and the streamer broke. In the next moment, he was already on the other side of the barrier. Everyone else was shocked. They looked at Li Yuanfang with complicated expressions. Someone counted the time with his fingers and said bitterly, "It's not midnight yet." Li Yuanfang let out a long breath. After cupping his fists and bowing to everyone with a solemn expression, he walked towards the formation. In the next moment, he disappeared into the formation, having been teleported to Jade Capital Mountain. All the disciples had complicated expressions. It was not easy for them to calm down and make use of the time to think about their own questions. As time passed, it was getting closer and closer to midnight. Chapter 614. The fact that Li Yuanfang took the first step undoubtedly had a great impact on those who were not calm enough. Of course, the impact was not necessarily one-sided. Some people were unsettled and could not concentrate to think about the problem, while some people's fighting spirit was stimulated and could instead be more focused. These performances fell into the eyes of Lin Feng, Xiao Yin, Shi Tianhao, and the others, which gave them a more direct understanding of these disciples' temperaments. Luo Qingwu sat cross-legged with her hands supporting her chin. Looking at Li Yuanfang's back as he left, she calmed down and began to think again. Dao Yuding's mentality stabilized faster, and she carefully pondered over the question that Lin Feng had said. For example, Tianqi sect might have other solutions for her problem, but letting her and Song Qingyuan complement each other was undoubtedly the most convenient and beneficial method. It was killing two birds with one stone. While solving the problem, if they didn't consider their personal feelings, it was indeed the most beneficial for their cultivation. However, there were many experts in Tianqi sect. The problems that they could think of did not mean that a foundation-building cultivator like Dao Yuding could figure them out in a short period of time. When I was climbing the pagoda just now, the spiritual aura that oppressed me and the treasure light that attacked me seemed to be strange. Dao Yuding thought for a moment, and an idea flashed in her mind. Could it be that the spiritual aura pressure and the treasure light attack actually contained hidden guidance? She suddenly realized that the test that she had received when climbing up the pagoda just now was not just a test. At the same time, there were some hidden rules that seemed to be some kind of guidance. She could vaguely find clues from the question that she was thinking about now. Dao Yuding suddenly understood. The current question could be sought, or rather, summarized, the answer from the previous test. At this time, she needed to carefully recall and comprehend the feeling that she had in the pagoda just now. This kind of comprehension was not a direct answer, and she needed to transform and summarize it herself. At the same time that Dao Yuding discovered this, Luo Qingwu also reacted. She began to carefully recall her specific feelings and the changes in her body and soul when she was facing the pressure of spiritual energy and the bombardment of the precious light when she was climbing. Then, she kept exploring and summarizing. After a long time, the little girl's eyes lit up. She stood up from the ground and grabbed the streamer with her name written on it. With a pull, she instantly went to the other side of the barrier. Luo Qingwu also learned from Li Yuanfang. She solemnly bowed to the other sect members on the other side of the barrier, then turned and walked towards the spell formation. As she walked, she exclaimed in her heart, "Everyone's topic should be different." Previously, in the tower, The magic power restriction targeted different people and gave different hints at the same time. Wow, there are hundreds of people. Ancestral Master is so powerful. It was just as Luo Qingwu was. This was also what Li Yuanfang comprehended just now. The test in the pagoda for them was actually mysterious. For the sake of fairness, the spiritual aura pressure and the treasure light intensity that everyone had to endure were the same. However, during this process, Lin Feng had gradually figured out their respective problems. Everyone followed the method taught by Zhu Yi to dispel the spiritual aura and resist the treasure light. Although the method was the same, everyone had different qualifications and different ways of using the method. This gradually revealed the problems that existed or might exist in their cultivation. Even those who had not cultivated qi at all previously had the same principle. As time passed, after figuring out everyone's problems, the spiritual aura pressure and the treasure light attack continued. Lin Feng secretly passed some pointers into everyone's body without leaving a trace. It was not words, not voices, not words, not consciousness, and not aura. It was just a simple feeling and understanding. After everyone reached the top of the pagoda, the white light screen floated with ribbons of light. Everyone had a question. It was not preset, but it was fresh out of the oven. Not to mention the talent detector, Lin Feng enveloped them with his own divine sense. With a turn, he could know the specific state of everyone's physical body and spirit. However, people were alive and their minds were changeable. It was unknown what problems they would encounter in cultivation. It was difficult to predict in advance. Through this method, Lin Feng clearly figured out everyone's shortcomings and then prescribed the right medicine. The good medicine had been sent to everyone before, so the work of brewing the medicine was left to them. At the same time, it could also test their comprehension. Of course, some people did not need to use this method to test the problems in their cultivation process. For example, Luo Qingwu, Dao Yuding, and the others. After a long period of contact, it was easy to find out. This kind of thing sounded simple, but dealing with more than 200 people at the same time and summarizing their problems at the same time, giving feedback separately, and checking the minute changes in their physical body and spirit, the mental energy consumed was not something ordinary people could bear. It was quite exhausting, but for Lin Feng, it was a piece of cake. After Li Yuanfang, Luo Qingwu finally solved her question. She stepped onto the spirit formation and was transported to Mount Yujing. After someone calculated the time, he said hesitantly, "It should be midnight. I wonder if she has passed." Everyone's thoughts were wandering, and some people's minds were even more restless. After a while, Dao Yuding also stood up. She grabbed the ribbons of light that were subordinate to her, went to the other side of the screen, and walked calmly towards the spirit formation. At this moment, no one said anything. The time now was definitely past midnight. Although it was not by much, it was indeed past time. In fact, the time that Dao Yuding used to think was basically the same as Luo Qingwu's. The time difference between them was actually the time when they reached the top of the pagoda. During the process of climbing the pagoda, Luo Qingwu was one step faster than Dao Yuding, and the time they took to solve the questions was basically the same. However, it was this time difference that allowed the two of them to complete the entire test one after the other. Whether or not Luo Qingwu had counted before midnight remained to be verified, but Dao Yuding was destined to have exceeded the time limit. On Mount Yujing, Shi Tianhao and the others shook their heads. It's a pity for Dao Yuding. She was just short by a little bit, at most 15 minutes. The slightest error can lead to a huge error. 15 minutes is already a very long time, Lin Feng said lightly. It was already past midnight, but the people at the top of the pagoda relaxed quite a bit. Although everyone felt a little regretful, they had completely calmed down and started solving the questions seriously. Time passed slowly. After Dao Yuding, Su Yunsheng, Ing Rosa, and Zhuge Wanqiu stood up together and walked to the white barrier, dropping their respective streamers of light. Then, the three of them were transported to the other side of the barrier. Su Yunsheng and Ing Rosa looked at each other. Slowly, Su Yunsheng shook his head. "You win this round." He had reached the top of the pagoda earlier than Rosa and Zhuge Wanxiu, and had started solving the questions earlier. However, in the end, they solved the questions together, and the two of them had caught up. Rosa snorted coldly. Don't give me that. One win and one loss, and the result is a tie. I still can't beat you. Zhuge Wanxiu looked at the two youths in front of her with some curiosity. One was arrogant like a wolf on the plains, while the other looked calm and dignified, but was actually as proud as an eagle in the sky. Senior brothers? Zhuge Wanxiu asked timidly. Can we go to the spell formation now? Rosa snorted and did not say anything. He walked towards the spell formation with his head lowered. Su Yinxing looked at Zhuge Wanxiu and nodded. Let's go. The three of them left the pagoda through the spell formation and were transported to Mount Yujing. After a while, Li Xingfei stood up and also pulled down her streamer of light, passing the final test. After a while, Lu Xiaofeng, Zhao Huan, Yin Wuwei, and a few other foundational disciples passed the test one after another. Time passed quickly. From time to time, there would be people who solved their questions and finally reached the spell formation, passing through it to ascend Mount Yujing. Suddenly, the purple pagoda shook. Although the white barrier and the streamers of light did not disappear, the spell formation on the other side of the barrier closed. Seeing this, the remaining people sighed dejectedly. This meant that they did not pass the test in the end and would not be able to become a true disciple. Some people were annoyed. They had already gotten the hang of it and were doing deductions and summaries. If they were given a little more time, they would be able to solve the questions. However, time waited for no one. The streamers of light on the white barrier suddenly flew down from the barrier and merged into the corresponding disciples' bodies. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Lin Feng's guidance turned into simple and clear words that appeared in their minds. Most of the streamers of light flew out of the top of the pagoda and landed in various places in the pagoda, finding their respective owners. Even if they did not reach the top of the pagoda, Lin Feng's guidance would not be lacking for them, even though they did not pass the examination. But every disciple that participated in the examination did not return empty-handed. Not only did they experience a period of training, they were also able to receive Lin Feng's guidance. For foundation disciples, this kind of opportunity is quite rare. The pagoda turned into a purple cloud and swept everyone up Mount Yujing, landing on the empty space at the top of the mountain. The purple cloud dissipated. Everything in the pagoda seemed to be an illusion. At this moment, everything had disappeared. Those who had been trapped by the mental demons also regained their senses. After understanding the situation, they could not help but feel somewhat dejected. However, they quickly regained their spirits and looked around curiously. Fun Tian Cliff, Qian Tian Palace, Fan Lin Residence, Snow Wind Valley, Nirvana Grotto Heaven, and Desolate Heaven Valley. These 6 grotto heavens were now filled with treasure auras and divine light. The disciples who passed the test also walked towards their respective grotto heavens. Now that they were already true disciples, they had the right to choose their own masters. However, they would also have to accept the test from Xiao Yin and the others. Passing the test would mean that their wishes would come true. If they did not pass the test, they would not be returned to Cloud Peak. Instead, they would be randomly assigned to another sect. However, in this way, it would inevitably be somewhat awkward when facing their masters in the future. Therefore, everyone was very careful in their choice. The foundational disciples who did not pass the test looked back and forth on the path to the 6 grotto heavens. They wanted to see how those who had already become true disciples would ultimately choose. Everyone's gaze first landed on a pale-skinned girl. At this moment, their emotions were somewhat complicated. That was Dao Yuding, who had the highest cultivation level among the foundational disciples who participated in the test. She had just entered the sect and was already in the late stage of the foundational building realm. Unfortunately, she was just a little bit off and lost the opportunity to become Lin Feng's personal disciple. However, Dao Yuding's expression was still rather calm. She was walking toward the grotto heaven unhurriedly. Chapter 615. Unexpectedly, the sect that Dao Yuding chose to enter was Wang Lin's mortal forest residence. Logically speaking, the two of them had even fought intensely as opponents at the Desolate Sea Assembly. To Wang Lin, who was only at the early stage of Foundation establishment, Dao Yuding, who was at the late stage of Foundation establishment, was one of the few strong opponents he had in the Desolate Sea Assembly. She had brought him immense pressure, and the outcome of the battle had only been a thin line. Because of the battle with Dao Yuding in the semifinals, even though Wang Lin had won, he had expended too much energy. He had no choice but to forfeit in the finals against Yu Hongyan. This guaranteed that Yu Hongyan would become the champion of the Foundation Establishment Realm competition. However, to Dao Yuding, this was not necessarily a good memory. Losing to an opponent at the early stage of Foundation establishment, even if it was by a thin line, was not something to be proud of, especially when Dao Yuding was the rising star of the Tianqi sect's younger generation. She was the top genius among the Foundation Establishment Realm disciples. Not seeing her opponent in the past for a day felt like 3 years. When they met again, she had already reached the Yuanying stage. Anyone would be caught unprepared by such a huge contrast. Dao Yuding's expression was still rather calm, but no one knew what she was thinking. Those who knew about the Desolate Sea Assembly were all muttering in their hearts. Actually, Dao Yuding's current state of mind was rather calm. As she walked on the rainbow purple cloud bridge to Mortal Forest residence, her father Dao Jiqiang's advice appeared in her mind. Ting, you must remember that if you can become the Patriarch's direct disciple, that would naturally be the best outcome. However, if you can't, you must think carefully about who your master will be. Although the Patriarch has 6 direct disciples, and the 6 of them get along very well, in my opinion, it's best for you to choose between Xiao, Zhu, Wang, or Shi as your master. In Dao Yuding's impression, her father's expression was very solemn when he said this. The founder valued all his personal disciples very much. Basically, he could treat all of them equally. But let's not talk about the fact that Xiao, Zhu, Wang, and Shi have higher cultivation levels. The key is that they entered the sect earlier. These 4 people were all disciples of the Patriarch when he first opened the door to the sect. In other words, if the Patriarch didn't open the door to the sect, he wouldn't have established the foundation of Xianmen Tianzhou. They were also the Patriarch's disciples. They were the disciples that the Patriarch took in when he was still a rogue cultivator. So, if you want to choose, it would be best for you to choose one of these 4 as your teacher. Dao Jiqiang analyzed in detail. First Elder Xiao Yin is the Patriarch's first disciple. His magic power is profound, and his combat ability is extremely outstanding. He is also in charge of the sect's alchemy room. The alchemy supply for his disciples will definitely be more abundant than that of the other grotto heavens. However, he mainly cultivates fire element and martial path abilities. The path of masculinity is not very beneficial for your future growth. Second Elder Zhu Yi is a person with a clear temperament and knows when to advance and when to retreat. He has always been the teacher of the Foundation disciples. At the same time, according to my observation, his ability to teach disciples should be the most outstanding among the 6. Third Elder Wang Lin is the person who fought with you at the Desolate Sea Assembly. He is a person who doesn't make a name for himself, but amazes the world with a single brilliant feat. He is quite strange and unpredictable. However, from my observation, he is decisive and has a strong murderous intent. If you become his disciple, not only will it be awkward because of what happened before, but it may not be beneficial for your development. At this point, Dao Jiqiang paused. His expression was slightly strange. He said, Elder Wang only has 1 disciple now. She is the only female disciple among the first batch of true disciples. Her name is Li Xingfei. Although her cultivation is only a qi refinement and is far from yours, she is quite good at dealing with people. She knows etiquette and knows when to advance and when to retreat. If you become the same disciple as her, I'm not worried about your cultivation progress. However, in terms of the way she conducts herself, if she has evil intentions and plots against you, I'm really afraid that you will be at a disadvantage. So, if it's possible, it's better for you not to choose Elder Wang. Dao Jiqiang continued. The sect master's youngest disciple, Shi Tianhao, is a young genius with outstanding talent. However, he mainly walks the path of physical martial arts and divine abilities, which is incompatible with your development. If you become his disciple, it will not be beneficial for you to bring out your strengths. In the end, Dao Jiqiang concluded, with my current position, it is not convenient for me to say these things. However, this matter concerns your future development path, so you must be careful. So, I have to say a few more words. You must consider it seriously. In summary, choosing second Elder Zhu Yi as your master is the most suitable. Dao Jiqiang hesitated for a moment before continuing. Apart from this, it depends on the specific situation. If you want to burn a cold stove, then there is another special choice. Apart from Xiao, Zhu, Wang, and Shi. That is ancestor's fifth disciple, Yang Qing. This person cultivates the Tao of Yin and Yang. In terms of Tao techniques, he is the most compatible with your characteristics. Also, he is in charge of the Medicine Valley, so he does not lack resources. Dao Jiqiang said, the only thing I have to worry about is that his cultivation is the same as yours. Under such a situation, if you become his disciple, it will inevitably be awkward for everyone. However, according to my observations, Elder Yang is a gentle person. I don't think he will hold a grudge against you because of this. Right now, he doesn't have any disciples under him. As long as you become his disciple, you will immediately become the leader of the direct disciples in Nirvana Wonderland. In terms of Tao techniques, it will be much more convenient. Although Elder Yu is a woman, don't consider it. She mainly cultivates martial arts and divine abilities, which is different from yours. Dao Jiqiang said a lot, and Dao Yuding listened attentively. However, she had her own ideas. She didn't choose Zhu Yi or Yang Qing. In the end, she chose Wang Lin's Fanlin house. The opponent of the past had become the person she wanted to become her disciple today. Dao Yuding naturally felt a little awkward, but more than that, she felt a strange feeling. Back then, in the Hidden Dragon Pot, the seemingly ordinary teen who was at the early stage of foundational cultivation fought her, who was at the late stage of foundational cultivation. Facing the shadow of death, neither of them retreated. They weren't afraid at all. I sliced open your neck with a knife. You destroyed my life with a finger. Between life and death, they were fearless and fought head-on to determine who was the winner. That kind of strange feeling made Dao Yuding, whose emotions rarely fluctuate, feel very novel. Even now, it was still fresh in her memory. And today, such an opponent had become an existence that she had to completely look up to. Dao Yuding didn't feel embarrassed. The kind of strange feeling continued to grow, and instead, it became more indescribable. However, it left a deep impression on her. Actually, Dao Yuding didn't know what kind of feeling she had, but when she needed to choose a master, almost without thinking, she naturally walked towards Fanlin House. At this moment, Dao Jiqiang also arrived at Yujing Mountain. Seeing that his daughter finally chose Fanlin House, he sighed. He was both gratified and disappointed. His daughter had grown up and had her own opinions. He was actually quite happy, but as a father, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Other than Dao Yuding, among this batch of direct disciples who passed the test, there were others who were more eye-catching. For example, Zhuge Wanqiao. She didn't pass the test too late and was the first to arrive at Yujing Mountain. However, her choice was a little shocking. She actually chose Shi Tianhao's desolate sky valley. Even Lin Feng couldn't understand this choice for a moment. This girl's talent advantage was that her soul was agile and sensitive. Generally speaking, the stronger the soul, the weaker the physical body. It wasn't that there weren't people who had both, but it was too rare. Zhuge Wanqiao belonged to the classic example of having a strong soul but a weak physical body. In the end, she chose Shi Tianhao, who had the strongest physical body martial arts among the 6 disciples. In the process of cultivation, shortcomings and weaknesses must be made up for, but more importantly, One must try their best to make use of their strengths and advantages. To make up for weaknesses and affect the development of strengths was not something that could be gained. But Zhuge Wanxiu chose this, and the reason for her choice was rather strange. Fortunately, no one knew about it, or else everyone's jaws would drop. Her choice was completely based on the wishes of her father, Zhuge Zhan. When her father, Zhuge Zhan, was about to enter the void battlefield, the father and daughter had a discussion about the specifics of the matter. Of course, it's to be the master of Xianmen. Do you still need to ask? Zhuge Zhan said matter-of-factly. Zhuge Wanxiu replied timidly, "It's definitely not easy to become a direct disciple of a strong person like the master of Xianmen. I'm afraid I can't do it." Zhuge Zhan stared at her. "How is that possible? My daughter." Halfway through his sentence, he thought of the terrifying strength that Xiao Yin, Shi Tianhao, and the others had shown at their own level, and his heart was beating fast. Even if she can't become a direct disciple of the master of Xianmen, my daughter will definitely become a second-generation direct disciple. It can't be any lower. After thinking carefully, he said to Zhuge Wanxiu, "Daughter, when the time comes, you could be sure Tianhao's disciple. Although he's a little young, he's worthy of the title of heaven's favorite. It won't affect your cultivation." Zhuge Wanxiu did not object. She was already used to her father's arrangements. She was just slightly curious. Why him? Because he's the youngest and he's still a kid. Zhuge Zhan curled his lips. "If it's an older one, don't take advantage of you. I know that there are dirty things happening in many factions nowadays. Masters make female disciples sleep with their masters. It's extremely bad. If you choose an older one as your master, I won't be at ease. As for the problem of your cultivation, it's not a big deal. Just follow him and cultivate with peace of mind. If there are any problems after I return from the void battlefield, even if you become a disciple of a sect, I can still give you special treatment. At that time, your future path will only be smoother." Thus, Zhuge Wanxiu's father, who was almost crazy about his daughter, decided the choice of Zhuge Wanxiu's master with just a few words. The little girl and Dao Yuding happened to walk on opposite ends of the spectrum. She did not have her own opinions about her own matters, and felt that her father's words made sense, so she did as he said. Then, a scene that made everyone's jaw drop happened. Other than Dao Yuding and Zhuge Wanxiu, the group of Foundation disciples were also carefully looking for the figures of Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu. These two were also the famous people who participated in this assessment. In the end, after looking around, they did not see them. Someone subconsciously looked in the direction of the All Heavens Hall, and his eyes immediately widened. There were two more people at the entrance of the All Heavens Hall. One of them was a tall and thin teenager with dark skin. It was Li Yuanfang, and the other looked like a little girl in her teens. It was Luo Qingwu. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, immediately understanding that the two of them had both passed the test before midnight and would be personally taken in by Patriarch Lin Feng as a disciple. Chapter 6:16. Under the gazes of the others, Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu stood silently outside the All Heavens Hall, waiting quietly. The two of them didn't feel anything about the complicated gazes of the others. Li Yuanfang really didn't care, while the little girl was immersed in joy and didn't pay attention to anything else. Slowly, the doors of the All Heavens Hall opened. A voice rang in Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu's minds. "Come in." The voice was calm, indifferent, and slightly amiable. It was Lin Feng's voice. Li Yuanfang bowed and immediately walked in. Luo Qingwu also came back to her senses. She also bowed and followed behind Li Yuanfang into the hall. On the throne in the hall, a purple-clothed young man sat cross-legged. He was relaxed and didn't look serious, but he had a dignified air about him. An expressionless, beautiful girl with half-black and half-white hair stood behind Lin Feng's seat with a huge sword case on her back. Her eyes were indifferent, as if there was no focus in them. She didn't react to Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu's entrance, turning a blind eye to them. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu came before the purple-clothed young man and bowed together. Disciple greets ancestral master. The person sitting on the throne was naturally Lin Feng. After not having to suppress the twin sky peaks, Xian Li reappeared and silently followed beside him. Lin Feng looked at the two people in front of him, faintly smiling. Before the exam, I said that those who can pass the exam and reach Jade Capital Mountain before midnight, I will take them in as my personal disciples. He first looked at Li Yuanfang. Li Yuanfang lowered his head slightly. Disciple is slow, but I will definitely do my best. It's my honor to be able to become ancestral master's disciple. Lin Feng smiled and nodded. He looked at Luo Qingwu and said, "You arrived at the right time, a minute before midnight." Although he was confident in Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu, Lin Feng did not go easy on them. The system had indeed evaluated everyone's potential, but data was just data. In the actual process, a slight deviation could cause a completely different effect. Taking Dao Yuding as an example, if one were to calculate the total value of innate bone strength, comprehension, and will, she and Luo Qingwu both had 24 points. However, due to the difference in their personal life experiences, when faced with the illusion of the inner demons, there was not much difference between Luo Qingwu, who had an 8-point willpower, and a 7-point willpower. When faced with the bombardment of the treasure light, the pressure of the spiritual aura, and the test of choosing the path, her 8-point willpower was inferior to that of Luo Qingwu, who had a 9-point willpower. As a result, she arrived at the top of the pagoda slightly later than Luo Qingwu. The two of them solved the questions at the top of the pagoda in roughly the same amount of time. However, it was precisely this difference of time that allowed the two of them to reach the top of the pagoda one after the other. They were stuck at the critical point at midnight and passed all the tests. The time difference was not much, but the results were different. As for this kind of deviation, Lin Feng would not deliberately correct it. Everyone had their own fate. Luo Qingwu arrived at the last moment and became a direct disciple. If she was slightly late, it was due to her ability and fate. Lin Feng would not make an exception for her. He would let her choose between Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the others, just like Dao Yuding. For Li Yuanfang, it was the same principle. Seeing Lin Feng look at her, Luo Qingwu hurriedly lowered her body and said softly, "Xiao Wu is lucky. I will work harder in the future." Lin Feng warmly encouraged them, then did not rush to have them perform the ceremony of becoming his disciple. Instead, he stood in the main hall and watched the process of the others go into the 6 great heavenly caves through the light and shadow illusion. This time, there were no less than 200 people participating in the test, but in the end, there were less than 20 who passed. The elimination rate was shockingly high. In terms of proportion, the elimination rate was even higher than the first Purple Chi Labyrinth test. This was intentional on Lin Feng's part. The sect was newly established. It was the time to lay the foundation. The first-generation disciples, Xiao Yin and the others, had already fully matured and would gradually become the pillars of the sect. The second-generation disciples shouldered the heavy responsibility of propagating the branches and leaves, which was equally important to the future development of the sect. As Xiao Yin and the others' cultivation grew higher and higher, they would completely open their path to becoming the Son of Heaven. They would travel the world and shock the world. At that time, it would be unrealistic to expect them to stay on a mountain and be teachers. To put it bluntly, Xiao Yin and the others would play the role of connecting the previous and the next in education. After that, their most important contribution to the sect would be in dealing with the outside world. They would become the face of Xianmen Tianzong and manage the overall situation of the sect. In terms of the younger generation's inheritance and internal construction, the second-generation disciples were the true main force. In the long run, the second-generation disciples, the following third-generation disciples, and the fourth-generation disciples would determine whether Xianmen Tianzong was a flash in the pan or eventually grew into a powerful sect that could dominate Tianyuan even without relying on Lin Feng. That's why Lin Feng personally presided over the last few true disciple exams. Moreover, The standards were very strict, striving for perfection. After the development of the sect was on the right track, even if it relied on inertia, as long as it did not deviate from the general direction, it could continue to develop all the way. What Lin Feng needed to do now was to ensure that the sect was on the right track. Of course, there was another consideration that only he himself knew, and that was that these few successor-disciple assessments were the talent reserved for Lin Feng's system's main task to meet the needs of the disciples in the Golden Elixir period. In addition to the task requiring the total number of disciples to exceed 1,000, and the disciples in the Yuanying period accounted for 1%, it also required the disciples in the Golden Elixir period to account for more than 10%. Relatively speaking, it was easier to meet the requirements than the disciples in the Yuanying period, but it also required early preparation to accumulate more talents in advance, and then carefully train them. In a sense, this was also a reserve for the task targets of the disciples in the Yuanying period. Although the system gave potential data, as mentioned before, the specific development of the situation often had a lot of changes. Who knew if there would be a dark horse that rushed out of the tight encirclement and gave people a surprise? The number of disciples who passed the assessment this time, including Dao Yuding and Zhuge Wanqiu, was a total of 19 people. Compared to the previous round of the independent selection of the disciples' master, there was not much difference overall. Xiao Yan and Zhu Yi were the most popular. Relatively speaking, the biggest difference was that Wang Lin's place had become very popular instead of being visited by very few people before. In the Void battlefield, the later stage of the Golden Elixir period blinded the early stage of the Yuanying period Shi Tiany's double pupil, directly breaking Shi Tiany's almost invincible legend among the younger generation. After that, he became the first disciple under Lin Feng to form his nascent soul. Compared to his previous low profile, such an explosive growth caused a huge contrast and naturally left a deeper impression on people. Wang Lin was in charge of the scripture depository, the important place where Xianmin Tianzong's Taoist scriptures were stored, and it was the most important place. When he was apprenticed to a master last time, he was too low profile, and everyone did not understand him, so there were still doubts in their hearts. But now, there was no more worry in this aspect, and naturally, Wang Lin's disciples became popular. Of course, there were some small reasons that outsiders did not know. For example, among the 3 goddess-like figures with the most outstanding appearance and charm among the second-generation disciples, other than Zhuge Wanqiu, Dao Yuding and Li Xingfei were both under Wang Lin's tutelage. After all, they were still young men. They were full of vigor. In comparison, Yuhongyan was more popular, while Shi Tianhao and Yangqing were still relatively less popular. Although Shi Tianhao had also demonstrated his prowess in the dragon arena, his age really was a barrier, which made many people shrink back. After all, the rapid progress of their own cultivation was not completely equivalent to whether they were a good master or not. The second-generation disciples were also hairless, but they were also worried about choosing an incompetent master. In the end, apart from Zhuge Wanqiu, only one other person chose to go to the desolate Heaven Valley. As for Yangqing's Nirvana Paradise, it was awkward once again. It ended up as a duck's egg. Not a single person chose to go. After all, compared to his seniors and juniors, Yangqing had always seemed mediocre. Among Lin Feng's many direct disciples, he had the least presence, and his cultivation was the lowest. He was like an invisible person. When Fun Tinya, Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and so on in the Heavenly Hall saw this, they all frowned slightly. Yangqing was a kind person, gentle and courteous. Outsiders felt that he was not eye-catching, but after interacting with his fellow disciples, they all had a close relationship with Yangqing. At this moment, seeing that he was still cold in the sect, they could not help but sigh. On the other hand, Yangqing himself did not particularly mind this. In his opinion, there were still many aspects of his sect that he did not understand that he needed to study, let alone teach his disciples. As for the matter of his pride, Yangqing did not care about it at all. He had always admitted that he was indeed the worst among his seniors and juniors, so an outcome like this was normal. He would not remain indifferent because of this. He would definitely work even harder on his cultivation, but he would not feel aggrieved or indignant. After the group of disciples chose the blessed land and paradise that they wanted to be apprenticed to, it was time for Xiao Yin and the rest to test them. The seniors and juniors had always adhered to the train of thought of choosing disciples, which was that there was no best, only better. They had high standards, strict requirements, and looked up to their master, Lin Feng. Their own disciples had to be the best. Hence, the layers of tests caused the group of second-generation disciples to complain incessantly. In the end, more than half of them could not pass the second round of tests and were eliminated by a sea of people. In the end, only Dao Yuding, Zhuge Wanxiu, and a few others passed Xiao Yin, Wang Lin, and the rest tests. Lin Feng was also observing. After passing Xiao Yan's second round of tests, there were a few good seedlings that stood out. Both of them were women. One was called Ku Jing, and the other was called Sun Shuer. Both of them performed well. It's just that this group of people is a bit more yin than yang. Lin Feng secretly scratched his head, including Dao Yuding and Zhuge Wanxiu. In this second round of successor disciple selection, the most outstanding few people were actually all female disciples, including Lin Feng's side and Luo Qingwu's. Poor Li Yuanfang was impressively a little green among the Red Mountains. The true disciples who did not pass Xiao Yin and Company's test were all a bit dejected, but what was worth them rejoicing over is that this time they will not be returned like the first test. They can still become true disciples. It's just that Lin Feng will randomly assign a master. After listening to Yang Qing's own opinion, Lin Feng finally left his sect empty and did not make a rigid assignment. Later, everyone who had their own sect, under the leadership of their respective masters, came back to the All Heavens Hall to greet Lin Feng. After the greeting, it was time to observe the ceremony. A group of little friends looked at Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu kneeling under Lin Feng with slight envy, and formally performed the ceremony of apprenticeship. Chapter 617. In the Celestial Hall, Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu bowed to Lin Feng together and formally became Lin Feng's personal disciples. Lin Feng personally taught them the Taoist scriptures of the 8 trigrams of the Great Way of the Heavens. After the ceremony of apprenticeship, the two of them greeted Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and other senior and junior brothers. In Lin Feng's disciple system, there was also a list of the two people's notes. Name, Li Yuanfang. Age, 17 years and 2 months. Current cultivation, early stage of foundation building, C of Qi realm. Potential attribute, root bone, 7. Comprehension, 9. Will, 9. Fortune, 6. Recommended education plan. Extremely high comprehension of formations, amazing talent, recommended as the main development direction of divine power. Lin Feng looked at the description and nodded slightly. Li Yuanfang's character was strict and serious, and he also had perfectionist tendencies. Coupled with his extraordinary talent and comprehension, he was indeed promising in the path of formations. In the process of getting along with him, Lin Feng had confirmed this many times. Of course, in addition to formations, Li Yuanfang's talent in the cultivation of Taoist techniques was also very outstanding. When the Taoist techniques he originally practiced under Ancestor, he too were transformed into the 8 trigrams of the Great Way of the Heavens. His realm would be more stable, and his personal strength would go to a higher level. The only concern was his root bone, which could only be regarded as above average. In ordinary sects, he would be a genius, but in Xianmen Tianzong, he seemed very inconspicuous. The direct problem was whether he could use the 8 trigrams of the Great Way of the Heavens to build a first-grade beer when he built his beer. In this aspect, Lin Feng definitely had to pay attention to it. With Li Yuanfang's temperament, there would basically be no problem in condensing the elixir cauldron in the future. When he formed his gold core in the future, there would also not be a big problem. After looking at Li Yuanfang's information, Lin Feng looked at Luo Qingwu's information. Name, Luo Qingwu. Age, 10 years and 2 months. Current cultivation, Qi Disciple Level 8. Potential attribute, root bone, 9. Comprehension, 8. Will, 7. Fortune, 6. Recommended education plan. Upgrade the Heavenly Een Spirit Pearl and obtain a purine body. It is recommended to cultivate Een-attributed Dao arts. In addition, outstanding talent in Sword Dao is recommended as the main development direction of divine powers. Lin Feng frowned slightly. Outstanding talent in swordsmanship? I couldn't tell. Everything else was fine, but the system's evaluation of Luo Qingwu's outstanding talent in swordsmanship stunned Lin Feng. He thought about it carefully. The Luo clan of the ancient Yuan-Tian realms inherited Taoist arts, and signature magical power was a magical power of martial arts, the art of saber manipulation. Ever since she was young, little Lolita had been practicing the saber Dao divine art. Among the treasures that her family had confiscated from her when she was young, there was an extremely high-quality saber from the Golden Elixir period. Before the shattering of the Heavenly Een Spirit Pearl, the Luo family really doted on little Lolita. She was just a Qi disciple, but they gave her a Dharma artifact from the Golden Elixir period to protect her. It could be said that they doted on her. Because of the family's inheritance, little Lolita had never come into contact with Sword Dao. Therefore, no one knew how talented she was in this aspect. If little Lolita hadn't become Lin Feng's disciple and stayed in the Luo family, regardless of whether the Heavenly Een Spirit Pearl existed or not, she would have definitely followed the established path to cultivate the Sword Dao divine art. The only difference was the level of attainment. She had never come into contact with it, and she couldn't remember to come into contact with it. Naturally, she wouldn't know whether she had talent or not. Especially as she grew older and her cultivation gradually increased, she would never abandon the saber and use the sword. Lin Feng looked at the system's explanation and clicked his tongue in wonder. He glanced at Luo Qingwu, and Luo Qingwu's eyes met his. Suddenly, her body trembled slightly. Little Lolita instantly felt as if her consciousness and body were separated, and her consciousness entered a completely unfamiliar world. In this world, sword lights that were as dense as raindrops rained down on her head from all directions. Luo Qingwu was still calm. She believed that her master wouldn't harm her. There must be a deeper meaning behind this. With this mentality, Luo Qingwu bathed in the sword rain without fear, resistance, or evasion. Instead, she used her heart to feel the hidden profoundness. Her consciousness condensed into a transparent body and rose into the air. She tapped the tip of her foot lightly and landed on a sharp sword gleam. After that, she immediately rose up and dodged a large number of sword gleams. Then, she landed on another sword gleam and tapped the tip of her foot again. In the beginning, her movements were still jerky and stiff as she moved around the sword gleams. She was surrounded by danger, which made people break out in cold sweat for her. However, as time passed, Luo Qingwu's movements became more agile. Not only did she not seem to be struggling, but there was also a different kind of beauty to her movements. She was like a fairy dancing in the sword rain. Even Luo Qingwu herself had a strange feeling that the sword gleams that covered the sky and covered the sun weren't scary at all. Instead, she felt amiable. All of a sudden, the sword rain in front of her disappeared. Luo Qingwu was slightly dazed. Her consciousness separated from that unfamiliar world as if her soul had returned to her body. The scene in front of her changed back to the scene in the All Heavens Grand Hall. Little Lolita looked at Lin Feng curiously. She was slightly apprehensive, but it wasn't appropriate for her to ask. Lin Feng retracted his gaze. Just now, he had used his supernatural power to strip off Luo Qingwu's soul. Then, he did a simple test to see if she was as talented as the system said. Luo Qingwu felt that a long time had passed. She had been dancing in the storm of sword lights for countless years, but in fact, it was just the blink of an eye. In the process of Lin Feng looking at her, she had already completed the test. The test results satisfied Lin Feng. The system's judgment was basically correct. Luo Qingwu's talent in the sword Dao was indeed very outstanding. Her cultivation in the past had covered up her amazing talent. In a certain sense, it had buried her talent. Through the test, Lin Feng discovered that Luo Qingwu's talent in the sword Dao wasn't in martial arts. It wasn't the usual sword manipulation, the one with the sword light birth, etc. Instead, it was a kind of profound concept of being a partner with the sword and resonating with each other. If I continue to cultivate her in this direction, I wonder to what extent she will grow. Lin Feng thought to himself. Her talent in the sword Dao should be matched with the advantages of her pure Yin body. It will bring out the best in each other and produce an effect that is greater than two. However, Lin Feng looked up at the sky slightly. It feels like she's not very suitable to inherit my heaven-punishing sword chi. However, it doesn't matter. Let's see if there are any second and third generation disciples who can stand out in the future. He looked down at Luo Qingwu and said with a smile, Xiao Wu, have you ever thought of practicing the sword Dao? After the test just now, Luo Qingwu naturally understood Lin Feng's intentions. She quickly nodded. Xiao Wu will listen to master's instructions. In fact, after experiencing the scene just now, Xiao Wu herself also felt that the sword Dao was indeed more suitable for her. Lin Feng gave a few more words of encouragement to Li Yuanfeng and Luo Qingwu before announcing the end of the test. The group of foundational disciples was sent back to Cloud Peak. Everyone was reluctant to leave. After staying on Yujing Mountain, the environment of Cloud Peak seemed to be a little lacking. They were able to adjust their mentality and made up their minds to go back and cultivate seriously. They would strive to become true disciples in the next test. The group of true disciples also followed their respective masters back to their respective blessed lands and grotto heavens to start practicing Dao. Becoming a true disciple was just the beginning of the path of cultivation. Li Yuanfeng and Luo Qingwu were still staying on Yujing Mountain for the time being. Lin Feng naturally took the matter of them opening their abodes to heart. He had already made arrangements, but it would take some time. After paying their respects to Lin Feng, Li Yuanfeng and Luo Qingwu returned to their original abodes on the mountain. They still needed to seriously figure out the 8 trigrams Great Way scripture that Lin Feng taught them and transform their original Dao foundation. After Luo Qingwu returned to the cave, Jun Zining was holding her cheeks while waiting for her in a daze. Seeing Luo Qingwu come in, Jun Zining came back to her senses and said with a smile, Xiao Wu, congratulations on becoming Senior Lin's personal disciple. Sister Zining, I feel like I'm dreaming now. The thing I've been looking forward to all this time has come true. I can't believe that I've really become Master's disciple. Luo Qingwu sat next to Jun Zining. She was still a little dizzy. She looked at Jun Zining. Sister Zining, why don't you become his disciple? Jun Zining sighed. My family knows that I'm here. They also want me to become a disciple of Xian Zongtian, but they are worried that there will be misunderstandings with Zixiao Dao. I thought about it carefully. Xiamen Tianzong and Zixiao Dao shouldn't have a rift because of nobody like me, but it's a bit awkward for my family to be stuck in the middle. You also know that my Jun family is not the same as the other 6 families. You're just supported. My Jun family's ancestors were born in Zixiao Dao. The relationship between the 2 sides is much closer, so we have to consider all aspects. Luo Qingwu asked, how can it be so exaggerated? Sister Zining, you're worrying too much. Jun Zining said, this is what my family wants, so I have to listen. This time, I ran away and caused a lot of trouble for my family. I don't want to cause more trouble for my family, so I'd rather believe it. Luo Qingwu shook her head. I still can't figure it out. If you can't figure it out, then don't think about it. Jun Zining stretched her waist. Let's wait and see. Maybe I can make it in time for the next disciple ceremony. Luo Qingwu said, if that's the case, I hope you can also pass the assessment. That way, not only will we be sisters, but we will also be fellow disciples. Jun Zining smiled and said, I don't dare to hope for that. My talent is not as good as yours, so I most likely won't be able to become a disciple of Senior Lin. If I can become a true disciple, that would be a blessing in my life. She said with a smile, "That's not bad. Although I'm a second-generation disciple, my best friend is everyone's martial ant. I can ride roughshod over everyone." Luo Qingwu wrinkled her little nose at her. "Call me martial ant or master first." The two little sisters laughed and joked. At this time, Xiao Yin, who was in charge of external relations, received news that in order to congratulate Xianmin Tianzong's second disciple ceremony, Great Zhou's Prince Liang Qian had sent a messenger with congratulatory gifts. The messenger came to Cloud Mirror City through the array of Shazhou City. The person who came was a young man in his teens. He was only at the foundation establishment stage, but his expression was calm and capable, and there was a faint brilliance in his eyes. Dao Jiqiang was the first to receive him. The young man cupped his hands as soon as he saw him. "I am Chu Yang. Nice to meet you, sir." Chapter 618. Dao Jiqiang sized up Chu Yang and thought, "I've heard of this person's name from Elder Zhu Yi." When he was still in the Qi refinement stage, he became the confidant of Great Zhou's Prince Liang Qian. He's a disciple of Beyond Heaven Mountain, but I've never heard of such an outstanding talent among the younger generation of Beyond Heaven Mountain. He seems to have suddenly appeared in the last 1 or 2 years. Could he be a core disciple that Beyond Heaven Mountain is secretly nurturing? But looking at his mannerisms, he treats people very maturely. He doesn't seem like someone who cultivates in the deep mountains. As Dao Jiqiang was observing Chu Yang was also observing him. This Dao Jiqiang, although his cultivation base isn't high, his cultivation talent is also average. He's still unable to form his gold core in his middle age, but he has taken up the position of Xianmin Tianzong's outer sect chief supervisor, occupying this extremely important position. According to the intelligence, this person originally worked in Wu Qingrou's residence before joining Xianmin Tianzong. He seems inconspicuous, but he's actually quite important. I'm afraid I'll have to deal with him often in the future. Chu Yang smiled and cupped his hands at Dao Jiqiang. "Mister, I'm Chu Yang. I've come under the fourth prince's order to send a congratulatory gift to congratulate your sect on its second disciple recruitment." Dao Jiqiang smiled amiably and didn't look down on Chu Yang because of his age and cultivation, nor did he have the slightest intention of being arrogant. He cupped his hands in greeting as well. "Thank you for your good intentions, Prince of the Great Zhou Dynasty. I thank you on behalf of my sect master." Chu Yang asked tentatively, "I wonder if I have the honor to meet the sect master of Xian's sect or the various elders of the sect?" Dao Jiqiang smiled and said, "The sect master and elders of Xian's sect have just gone into seclusion. I'm afraid it's inconvenient for them to meet guests. Please don't take offense if I've been rude." "Not at all, not at all. I've been presumptuous." Chu Yang nodded. He wasn't disappointed. He didn't have much hope in the first place. Not only was Lin Feng's prestige growing, even Zhu Yi, who had interacted with him before, was now at the Yuanying stage. In any other clan, he would be a patriarch. If the fourth prince, Liang Qian, were to come in person, there might be a chance that he would be received. After both parties checked the gifts, Dao Jiqiang once again thanked Liang Qian on behalf of Xianmin Tianzong for his kindness and gave him some gifts in return. Chu Yang arranged for his entourage to return the gifts, but he himself indicated that he would be permanently stationed at Mount Kunlun, hoping to obtain Xianmin Tianzong's permission. Dao Jiqiang was not surprised by this. After the Battle of West Hill City, many other sects and forces had sent people over. Basically, they were all in the Sand Continent City area and were responsible for contacting Xianmin Tianzong. It was Dao Jiqiang's responsibility to settle these people down. However, Liang Qian and Chu Yang's side was slightly different. Liang Qian was a prince of the Great Zhou Dynasty, and not the leader of an independent force. However, when Zhu Yi was in Tianjing City, he had a good chat with Liang Qian. Because of Crown Prince Liang Yuan, they had even worked together before. Dao Jiqiang thought for a while, then agreed to allow Chu Yang to stay in Sand Continent City. Speaking of which, as Xianmin Tianzong's power grew, even Sand Continent City was gradually included in Xianmin Tianzong's sphere of influence. Tianmao Pavilion was established in business. As long as it didn't interfere with trade, they didn't mind. Their relationship with Xianmin Tianzong became even closer. Crown Prince Liang Yuan of the Great Zhou has just been reprimanded by Emperor Liang Pan for the Joss Flame cult. His position as Crown Prince is even showing signs of instability. Fourth Prince Liang Qian is even more interested in the position of Crown Prince. Contacting the main sect is a great help. Dao Jiqiang thought to himself, but he can't get too close to our sect, or else it will inevitably arouse Liang Pan's suspicions. Sending a young man with a low cultivation base, who won't attract attention, but can be relied on as a trusted aide, to be stationed here is a brilliant move. It's fortunate that he has a suitable subordinate like Chu Yang. After confirming that he would stay here for a long time, Chu Yang smiled as he bid farewell to Dao Jiqiang and left. His gaze seemed to inadvertently sweep across Cloud Mirror City in front of him, and the distant Mirror Lake on the other side of the cloud peak, before finally looking at the empty blue sky. Although he didn't know where Yujing Mountain was, he couldn't help but look at the sky. When I came here last time, it was still a barren mountain, but now a grand city has risen from the ground, and a great lake has even appeared. It's unbelievable. Chu Yang sighed and sighed. Though with the power and abilities of the master of the School of Wonders, all of this is but a piece of cake. Luo Qingwu had appeared in West Hill City, and Xianmin Tianzong had even come into a small conflict with the Taishu Temple because of her. Yu Hanyan had heavily injured by Shiqian. This news had already spread across the world before the battle between the stones and the Dragon Arena. Although Chu Yang was in the Great Zhou dynasty, he obviously knew about it too. Before this, Chu Yang had finally obtained accurate information from the Crown Prince's young master, Chun Yu. Luo Qingwu had indeed stayed temporarily in his estate, and he had received news from the Luo clan of the ancient Origin Heaven world. Just like in Chu Yang's memories, Luo Qingwu had encountered a disaster, and her heaven's accumulation of Yin's soul pearl was on the verge of shattering. Chu Yang was extremely worried about this, but there just happened to be no news of Luo Qingwu after she left Chen Yu's estate. Afterwards, he received news that Luo Qingwu had appeared in West Hill City. Not only was she safe and sound, but she had even become the renowned possessor of the pure Yin body. Chu Yang could not help but let out a great sigh of relief. At first, he ravished with joy. He had finally obtained accurate information about Luo Qingwu, and Luo Qingwu was safe and sound. But afterwards, he became conflicted again. When Xianmin Tianzong opened their doors for the second time, Luo Qingwu had become a disciple of Xianmin Tianzong. Xianmin Tianzong's headquarters, Yujing Mountain, was hidden in space. It was impossible for outsiders to visit. For example, even if Chu Yang hurried to the Kunlun Mountains, he would only be able to reach Cloud Mirror City at most. He could not even make it to the top of the clouds, let alone Yujing Mountain. As a matter of fact, even if he stayed in Cloud Mirror City temporarily, he would only stay there temporarily under the excuse of delivering the congratulatory gift. Even if he stayed there permanently in the future, he would have to go to Sand Province City. Everything is difficult at the beginning. There will always be a chance. Chu Yang sighed. This time, Liang Qian wanted to send a trusted aide to stay here permanently to communicate with him. Chu Yang was indeed the most suitable candidate. He did not even need to say anything or even hint. Liang Qian and the others had taken the initiative to suggest it. Of course, little Chu Yang could not have come all the way to the great western desert to eat sand purely to pick up girls. Although deep in his heart, he had always faintly resisted having too much contact with Lin Feng and Xianmin Tianzong. But this time, Chu Yang still adjusted his attitude and came. His sect beyond Heaven Mountain had previously been very close to the Shushan sword sect, almost attaching itself to Shushan. This was partly due to Wu Qingrou's plan from a long time ago, and partly due to the decisions of the upper echelons of Beyond Heaven Mountain. Now, Wu Qingrou's plan had been temporarily put on hold, but there was a faint new danger emerging, causing Beyond Heaven Mountain to no longer be peaceful. In Chu Yang's memories, whether it was a dream or a real future, the reason why Beyond Heaven Mountain was destroyed was because it was used by Wu Qingru as the fuse for the conflict between the Great Zhou dynasty and the Shushan sword sect. In the end, it was crushed by the Great Zhou dynasty. Although it seemed like the Great Zhou dynasty would not clash with the Shushan sword sect again, Xianmen Tianzong had replaced the Great Zhou dynasty's position, opposing the Shushan sword sect with equal harshness. Xu Yang had a very deep worry. He was worried that the events in his memories would repeat in a different way. Whether it was the Shushan sword sect or Xianmen Tianzong, if they wanted to destroy Beyond Heaven Mountain, it would be as easy as lifting a finger. One reason he came to Kunlun Mountain this time was to find a chance to see Luo Qingwu again, but he was not in a hurry. After all, he knew that Luo Qingwu was currently safe and sound and had a great opportunity. Chu Yang's main purpose of this trip was actually to seek a chance to interact with Xianmen Tianzong and a fight for a new path for his sect beyond Heaven Mountain. In Chu Yang's heart, although he felt an indescribable fear when facing Lin Feng, a kind of uneasiness that came from the unknown between Xianmen Tianzong and the Shushan sword sect, he was more inclined towards Xianmen Tianzong. My current cultivation is still too low, and my status is not high enough. It is definitely impossible for me to seek a path for beyond Heaven Mountain, but I will try my best to establish a friendly relationship. When the elders of the sect come over, they can also help me build a bridge. One step at a time, from the outside to the inside, slowly operating. After Chu Yang settled down in the Sand Continent city, he thought to himself, sigh, it's just that time waits for no one. I hope that after the Mount Shu sword sect suffer a loss in Shilling City this time, they will not clash with the celestial sect of Xian for a short period of time. I'm just afraid that there will be a third party with ulterior motives, and that the two great powers will soon start fighting again. On Jade Capital Mountain, Dao Jiqiang came up the mountain with Liang Qian's congratulatory gifts. Among the gifts were for Lin Feng himself, Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the others. However, Liang Qian and Chu Yang naturally did not know that Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu had joined the sect, so they had only prepared 6 gifts. Lin Feng received the gift list and scanned it. When he heard that Chu Yang had come to send gifts, a strange smile immediately appeared on his lips. Although the gifts on the list were exquisite, with Liang Qian's wealth, there were not many gifts that could catch the eye of Lin Feng. After all, the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. However, Lin Feng could see that Liang Qian had indeed put in a lot of effort. What made Lin Feng not know whether to laugh or cry was that there was one item on the list that was most suitable for cultivators with a purine body. Lin Feng himself had no use for this item, so it was obvious that it was prepared for Luo Qingwu. Luo Qingwu's purine body was widely known. It was understandable that Liang Qian thought highly of her potential and felt that she would definitely be able to occupy a place in Xianmen Tianzong in the future. However, Lin Feng was 80% sure that this gift was Chu Yang's idea. Even the item itself had been offered by him. After finding out that Chu Yang had been ordered to stay in the Sand Continent, Lin Feng could not help but laugh and shake his head. Rascal! You're still thinking about my disciple? Then you'll have to eat sand in the Sand Continent city for a few years and wait for my disciple to grow up. The little girl naturally did not know that someone was thinking about her. She was currently being watched by Shi Tianhao and the others. Ha ha ha! Shi Tianhao threw his head back and laughed. The world is everlasting and changes are endless. Lord Shi Tianhao is no longer the youngest. Back then, he had volunteered to be the youngest junior brother, and the other senior brothers and sisters who had entered the sect were indeed older than him. Therefore, Shi Tianhao had always been willing to endure the hardship. However, as time passed, he felt that it would not be bad if he could have a junior brother or sister. When the time came, if his junior brother or sister was bullied, he could just stand there and defeat the opponent. Then, his junior brother or sister would proudly say, "This is my senior brother Shi. TSK, TSK, Just thinking about it made him feel proud. Chapter 619. Luo Qingwu was only 10 years old, even younger than Shi Tianhao. Once she entered the sect, she would not be able to be the senior sister, becoming everyone's junior sister. Even though the little Shi Tianhao was still the junior brother, he was no longer at the bottom. But Li Yuanfang insisted on calling Shi Tianhao senior brother. In the end, Shi Tianhao was teased by Xiao Yin and the others. With Luo Qingwu as his foundation, he did not care too much about this, and so insisted on keeping his word. If he wanted to reason, then Li Yuanfang could reason with him. But since he said that he would keep his word, Li Yuanfang felt that it was not good for him to persist. Xiao Wu greets senior brother, senior sister. The little lowly respectfully bowed to Xiao Yin, Shi Tianhao, Yu Hongyin, and the others. As she spoke, she suddenly felt a gaze fixed on her. Turning her head to look, she saw a little girl even younger than her. This little girl had 2 pigtails and was born snow white and cute, making Luo Qingwu feel happy when she saw her, but the other's gaze was not very friendly. Xiao Yin turned to look at the little girl. "Tuntin, what's wrong with you again?" Tuntin snorted, not saying anything. Shi Tianhao smiled. "You learn from my junior sister, be a bit more refined and obedient. That way you'll be able to marry in the future. Haven't you always been thinking about that mysterious nether beast? Maybe it's because of your devilish brat conduct that people don't want you. It's fine if others call me that, but I don't want you to call me a devilish brat." Tuntin complained. She glanced at Luo Qingwu and snorted. "Besides, she's only obedient on the surface. She's actually not as good as me." Luo Qingwu's eyes widened, looking strangely at Tuntin. Tuntin glared at her fiercely. "What are you looking at? Did I wrongly accuse you?" Xiaoyan asked. "What basis do you have for saying that?" Tuntin curled its lips. "A woman's. No, a female Tao Ye's intuition." Xiao Yan and the others rolled their eyes. Shi Tianhao sneered and said, "I'd rather believe that pigs can climb trees than believe you." Luo Qingwu shrunk back to Xiao Yan's side timidly. She blinked her eyes and asked carefully, "Did I do something wrong before?" "You didn't do anything wrong. Someone's just crazy." Xiao Yan blushed as he shielded Luo Qingwu behind him. He stared at Tuntin and said, "Don't you dare provoke my junior sister. Otherwise, we'll settle our old and new debts together." Tuntin shouted in dissatisfaction, "I'm telling the truth." She glanced at Xiao Yin and the others and snorted heavily. "Males like you're easily deceived by false appearances." Yu Hongyin raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard that. Before he could speak, Tuntin shouted at her, "You've been led astray by them too." After saying that, Tuntin ran away without looking back, leaving Yu Hongyin and the others who did not know whether to laugh or cry. Xiao Yin turned to Luo Qingwu and said, "If she dares to find trouble with you, come and tell eldest senior brother." Luo Qingwu said softly in a soft voice, "I'll just hide from her in the future." "Are you kidding me?" Xiao Yin raised his eyebrows. "Afraid of her? Give her some guts and try. If she dares to touch you, I'll beat her back to the state of a remnant soul." Shi Tianhao patted the little lowly's head. "Don't be so timid. Don't be so soft-hearted. It's always been us bullying others. We can't let others bully us, understand?" As Shi Tianhao spoke, he felt that it was very touching and patted Luo Qingwu's little head again. He instantly felt that his master and senior brothers loved to do this when he was young, and it was not without reason. It felt pretty good. However, now that he had grown up, he would definitely not let them pat him anymore. But before his little junior sister grew up, he could still find some supplements. Luo Qingwu answered crisply, "Yes, I'll remember." A consciousness suddenly surged into her mind, and Lin Feng's figure appeared, looking at her with a faint smile on his face. Luo Qingwu quickly stuck out her tongue. Lin Feng's consciousness retreated from Luo Qingwu's mind, and he could not help but find it a little funny. Needless to say, Tuntin's intuition was quite accurate. Lin Feng had a rather deep understanding of Luo Qingwu. He clearly knew that although she appeared childish and clumsy most of the time, this little lowly was in fact a little mischievous. She looked obedient and cute on the outside, but was actually a naughty child on the inside, and was more similar to Shi Tianhao. Just now, she retreated in order to advance, and instantly tricked Tuntin. To be precise, Tuntin jumped into the pit itself, and the little lowly helped it fill in a few shovelfuls of soil. That idiot Tuntin must be feeling very wrong now, right? Lin Feng shook his head and laughed. If you were to give Tuntin an internal monologue at this moment, it would probably be like this. I have tattoos, smoke, drink, swear. No, wrong. It should be me who is gluttonous, stupid, straightforward, and swear, but I know I'm a good girl. A real bitch likes to pretend to be innocent, pure, shy, and likes to wear pink. No, red clothes. Men are superficial and only look at the surface. Therefore, they can only miss out on a good girl and be deceived by a bitch until they wish they were dead. Only women can tell who is a real bitch. These were the words that were rolling over and over in Tuntin's heart at this moment. Lin Feng chuckled. In reality, how could Xiao Yin, Shi Tianhao, and the rest not be able to tell what Luo Qingwu was like after interacting with her for a while? They just liked to tease the two little girls. Luo Qingwu was a little mischievous, but she was not very aggressive and generally would not take the initiative to provoke others. If Tuntin had not taken the initiative to show hostility in the beginning, Luo Qingwu naturally would not have taken the opportunity to help her fill in the soil. It was normal for youngsters to like to tease each other. Tuntin would not really hurt Luo Qingwu, and most likely wanted to expose the White Lotus true face. However, no matter how I look at it, I feel that her future is not optimistic. Lin Feng laughed unscrupulously. A hot-tempered person and a black-bellied person together, under the premise that no violence is used, no matter how I look at it, the hot-tempered person is more likely to be at a disadvantage. At this point, Lin Feng's personal disciples had also arranged their seats. The first disciple, Xiao Yin, the second disciple, Zhu Yi, the third disciple, Wang Lin, the fourth disciple, Yu Hongyan, and the fifth disciple, Yang Qing, remained the same, but the sixth disciple, Li Yuanfang, was added, followed by everyone's little junior brother, Shi Tianhao, and little junior sister, Luo Qingwu. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu were new disciples, and they had to transform their original Taoist foundation into the 8 trigrams Great Way scripture. Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the rest all had new disciples that needed to be taught. The second assessment, to select a successor disciple, was different from the first assessment to select a successor disciple. During the first selection, the foundation disciples had already gone through a certain degree of basic training under the guidance of Zhu Yi, and then they separately acknowledged each other as their master. Among the people who passed the second assessment, there were the Sand Continent's founding disciples who failed the previous assessment and had gone through a long period of basic training. But there were also the West Hill City's founding disciples. Some of them had no foundation in Taoist techniques at all, and although some of them had, they were not taught systematically by Xianmin Tianzong. So the successor disciples this time, Xiao Yin, Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, Yu Hongyan, and the rest had it harder than the previous time. Without Zhu Yi to lay the foundation for them, a portion of the new successor disciples had to be taught from the beginning. Yang Qing had no one to acknowledge him as a master, and he himself was happy to be at ease. After proper preparation, he finally began his seclusion to break through to the golden elixir realm. And after settling the matters on hand, Xiao Yin and Shi Tianhao also began to prepare for forming their nascent soul. Lin Feng was not worried about Shi Tianhao forming his nascent soul. In fact, before the battle with Shi Tianhao already had the strength to break through to the Yuanying realm, but in order to achieve perfection, he deliberately delayed it. Now that he had won the battle with Shi Tianhao and ended the karma between them, whether it was his state of mind or his mana, they had reached the best state. At this time, going through the Void Thunder tribulation to form his nascent soul was no longer a sure thing, but but a 100% sure thing. What Lin Feng was more concerned about was Yang Qing forming his nascent soul, as well as Xiao Yin forming his nascent soul. Yang Qing's personal state of mind was a problem. His mana, supernatural power, and understanding of his own body were already infinitely close to the level of immortality. The only difficulty was in breaking through the difficulties of life and death. If he could get through the hurdle of his state of mind, then forming his nascent soul would be as easy as walking on flat ground. However, with Yang Qing's character, since he dared to take this step, it meant that he was very confident in his heart. Even if there was a trace of ambiguity, he might not break through to the golden elixir period now. It seemed that his previous deliberate training was fruitful. Therefore, Lin Feng was not particularly worried about Yang Qing. He just needed to take care of him a little. The one with more problems was Xiao Yan. Of course, the problem did not lie with Xiao Yan himself. With Xiao Yan's current state of mind and mana, forming his nascent soul was actually not that difficult. However, Lin Feng had a rather crazy idea. If he could succeed, Xiao Yan's strength after forming his nascent soul would be much stronger than expected. However, it was precisely because of this idea that Xiao Yan's nascent soul formation would be more dangerous and difficult. Therefore, most of Lin Feng's energy fell on his side to protect him and turn his idea into reality. After listening to Lin Feng's explanation, Xiao Yan's first reaction was to agree. He was bold and brave by nature and was not afraid of hardships and dangers. Lin Feng's idea was just to his liking. After everything began, as Lin Feng expected, the first to achieve results was Shi Tianhao. After the Void Thunder Tribulation, Shi Tianhao's golden elixir split open, and a shining baby appeared on top of his head. Around the baby's body, there were two colorful ribbon-like creation divine light hovering and dancing. The brilliance and aura in the divine light were restrained. It looked very ordinary, but it had a kind of power that could shock the world. Congratulations to the host pro-disciple, Shi Tianhao, for advancing to the Yuanying stage. The sound of the system notification rang in Lin Feng's ears. Shi Tianhao, who was in front of him, also slowly retracted his Yuanying stage. He opened his eyes and let out a long roar. Then he bowed to Lin Feng. "Thank you, Master, for your teachings in the past." "Very good, you did very well." Lin Feng nodded repeatedly. "I still have to take care of your eldest senior brother and your fifth senior brother, so I give you a task. After nourishing Yuanying and stabilizing your realm, arrange the cultivation matters of your disciples, and then go find something and bring it back. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.